If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 81, The Frenzel Family. In ancient times, there was a man who dreamt of a butterfly. Upon waking up, the man couldn't tell if he had turned into the butterfly in his dream or if the butterfly had dreamt of becoming him. Riesel's current feelings were somewhat similar. Waking up in a daze on a somewhat familiar bed, he briefly questioned whether the 3+ months in Orario were real or just a dream. Maybe his current self was just the imagined existence of the monster rookie named Riesel in the Loki Familia. Fortunately, the sensation of the slowly rotating transparent cube in his mind reassured him that both of his selves, in this world and the other, were indeed real. Ha! Riesel let out a breath and sat up, his gaze gradually restored to sobriety and calmness. He moved his limbs slightly, feeling the power he possessed in the world of Danmachi. It really comes with me. Feeling the presence of power and the faint warmth behind him, Riesel knew that his back was now marked with the blessing called Falna. It was the result of his efforts in Danmachi for over 3 months, now entirely brought back to this world without any sense of discomfort. As for Loki's blood and the 2 swords, Fool and Hermit, chosen by him to bring back, they now lay quietly in the dimensional magic cube storage space, waiting for him to retrieve them at any time. All of this told him that the 3+ months he spent in Danmachi were not in vain. Those efforts had now transformed into his power, becoming his means of survival in this dangerous world. With these thoughts in mind, Riesel's lips curled slightly. He quickly uncovered the blanket and got out of bed. This was the first time he had walked out of bed in this world. When he first arrived, he had been recovering on this bed for a whole month, without the chance to get up. If I had the power I have now back then, I wouldn't have had to lie in bed for a month. His injuries at that time, for the current him, were something Diafratel could solve effortlessly. Unfortunately, he was powerless at that time and did not even have enough energy in the dimensional magic cube for a month's worth, making it impossible for him to perform dimensional travel. Just as he was about to walk to the window, draw back the curtain, and take a good look at the outside world, a knock on the door suddenly echoed. "Mr. Riesel, are you awake?" It was the voice of the maid working in this mansion. She seemed to be specifically in charge of bringing him meals, and during the month he spent recovering here, the most common sound he heard was the polite knock on the door. "I'm awake, come in." Riesel replied naturally as if he had never left this room from start to finish. The maid outside seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and immediately opened the door. "You can get out of bed now." The maid looked at him standing by the bed. "That's great. Thank you for your help these days." Riesel expressed his gratitude. "I'm all right now. Where is your lady?" "Lady Yuri is in the courtyard." The maid answered respectfully. "She mentioned that if Mr. Riesel wakes up and can move, you can find her in the courtyard." "I understand." Riesel nodded and examined his body. "Could you please help me find a set of clothes?" Due to lying in bed for the entire recovery period, he was currently dressed in something more like loungewear rather than suitable for going out. Given Yuri's noble status and the fact that she was his lifesaver, he couldn't afford to meet her in such clothes now that he had fully recovered. "Please wait a moment." The maid seemed prepared as if she had anticipated this. She left for a while and returned with a set of clothes in her hands. "These are the clothes prepared for you by Lady Yuri." The maid handed the clothes to him, even ready to assist him in changing. "No need, I can manage on my own." Riesel politely declined. The maid had taken care of his daily needs for a month, so he didn't want to trouble her further. "Then, I'll take my leave." The maid didn't insist, bowed her head, and left the room. Riesel quickly changed into the new clothes and found them unexpectedly luxurious. "Why does it look so much like noble clothing?" Riesel looked at his reflection in the window glass, feeling somewhat speechless. This outfit resembled court attire, white with purple patterns, adorned with numerous pendants and chains, transforming him from his previously sickly appearance into someone resembling a medieval European noble. This kind of extravagant and almost exaggerated clothing brought back many unpleasant memories for him. In his previous life, he had worn such ridiculous outfits frequently, attending various social events. However, he never got used to it, finding it rather tiresome and repulsive. Whatever, living under another's roof, don't expect too much. Riesel sighed and suppressed the thoughts about his appearance, stepping out of the room. This was his first time stepping out of this room, taking an actual and powerful step into this world. He really wanted to see what this world was like. The mansion where he was staying was rather luxurious. After a quick tour, he realized that this mansion was much larger than he had imagined. In terms of land area, this mansion was much bigger than Twilight Manor. Although Twilight Manor was indeed large, its actual space wasn't that vast due to being built as a series of high towers extending upward. This mansion, on the other hand, was different. It wasn't tall, roughly equivalent to a 4-story building, with only the first floor being relatively high, while the other floors weren't that elevated. But this mansion had a very vast land area, not only long and wide but also surrounded by a courtyard that spread around the mansion. In the courtyard, there were green plants, flower beds, a fountain, a small pavilion, and even 2 flowing streams, resembling an estate. However, despite being such an estate, it was only something like a secondary residence of the Frenzel family, not the main residence. Riesel searched his memory, recalling the knowledge of this world. The place he was in now was located in a kingdom located in the eastern part of the Akasha continent, known as the Gina's Kingdom. Akasha continent was an extremely vast landmass with many countries. Among these countries, most were small countries, with only 4 being considered major countries. Gina's was one of these 4 major countries, with a vast territory, abundant resources and a highly developed magic civilization, considered one of the few great nations of magic in the world. The Frenzel family, in particular, belonged to the nobility of Gina's, which was a family of marquis. How did they work? It was quite simple. In this world, regardless of the country, the royal family was the supreme ruler, the master of the country. Beneath the royal family were the nobles, each with their own privileges determined by the rank of their titles. Duke, Marquis, and Count were considered major nobles, enjoying the highest level of privileges within the kingdom. Viscount and Baron were considered minor nobles, not reaching the status of the top 3, yet still elevated above commoners and merchants. Among them, a duke held the highest position and the greatest privileges, a title bestowed only upon close relatives of the royal family. In other words, Marquis was the highest title attainable by ordinary people with status and privileges second only to the royal family and its close relatives. The Frenzel family was one such Marquis family in Gina's. From this, one could see how respected Yuri's status had been. Of course, her significance was not solely derived from being a member of a Marquis family. According to the memory of the original Riesel, the evaluation of Yuri had always been consistent. This girl is undoubtedly one of the most impressive characters in the world. Riesel himself also fully agreed with this evaluation and still believed in it to this day. With this in mind, he stepped out of the mansion and went into the courtyard. The courtyard was vast and expansive, making it challenging to find someone in this place. However, he remained calm and casually strolled around before spotting his target in a pavilion. Riesel. The one calling him was none other than the master of this residence, Yuri Frenzel. Yuri, a noble lady similar in age to Riesel, was dressed in a sensible outfit, exuding a noble air from head to toe. Her waist-length, shiny silver hair flowed down her back, as always, radiating elegance and beauty. This beautiful noble lady sat in the pavilion, seemingly enjoying afternoon tea. Her captivating eyes fixated on him, portraying a good mood. Beside Yuri stood a maid. Her age was close to Riesel's, around 20 or younger. Not tall, a bit shorter than him, but delicate as a twinkling gem. Her appearance was outstanding, though with a hint of coldness and aggressiveness. If one ignored the teapot in her hand and her attire, one might believe she was a female knight, despite her somewhat domineering demeanor. Riesel was not unfamiliar with this maid. She was Yuri's personal maid, always at her side, specifically tasked with attending to her needs. Her name was Marilyn Impesh. When Riesel approached, Marilyn noticed him but only gave a fleeting glance before ignoring his presence. He did the same, casting a brief glance at her before arriving in front of Yuri. "Not a bad outfit, and you seem to be in good spirits. Looks like you've fully recovered," Yuri said casually, revealing a beautiful smile. "It all thanks to your help," Riesel replied with a faint smile. "Have a seat." Yuri nodded and gestured toward the seat opposite her. Riesel didn't hesitate and took a seat in front of her. The two had known each other for quite some time, and finally, they had the chance to sit down and have a proper conversation. Chapter 82, Strategic Class Magician. Marilyn. Yuri called the maid by her side. The maid remained silent, only to pull out a teacup from seemingly nowhere and place it in front of Riesel, pouring a steaming cup of black tea for him. The aroma of the tea was pleasant, catching even Riesel, who was usually indifferent to tea, off guard. He quickly picked it up and took a sip. As soon as he tasted it, he regretted it immediately. This was ridiculously sweet. It felt like at least a dozen spoons of sugar had been added, sweet enough to almost dissolve his tongue. His lips twitched a few times, wanting to say something but eventually giving up, forcing a faint smile. It was not without reason. He saw Yuri seem to enjoy the tea, displaying a satisfied expression. It was evident that she was extremely pleased with this sweet tea. Riesel wasn't lacking in social awareness and wouldn't deliberately point out anything at this moment. At the same time, Yuri also observed his behavior. Seeing him sitting there in silence with a faint smile adorning his face. Seeing you in such high spirits, I feel relieved. When the servant went to deliver your meal yesterday and got no response after knocking, I thought you were resting and didn't want to disturb you. But you stayed in your room for a whole day without eating or drinking. If the protective magic system of this mansion hadn't been activated, I would have thought something happened to you again. Yuri said with relief. One could imagine that if Riesel had appeared even a bit later, she might have sent someone into his room to check on him. After all, he had once faced an assassination attempt in this mansion, so it was natural for her to be concerned. I'm sorry for worrying you. Riesel said as he put down the teacup and looked at her. But, as you can see, I'm good now, so there's nothing to worry about. I can see that. Yuri glanced over his body, nodding satisfactorily. You're indeed in much better shape than yesterday. He no longer looked sickly and his complexion wasn't pale anymore. He appeared lively, even his gaze was different, like a sword ready to be unsheathed at any moment, sharp and surprising even herself. However, no matter what, his recovery was a good thing. What are your plans now? Yuri casually stirred the black tea in front of her with a spoon as she asked nonchalantly. Riesel didn't hesitate much in responding. Since my injuries have healed, I've naturally decided to leave. I can't trouble you any longer. He had made this decision before returning. The Frenzel family was different from the Loki familia. Loki familia was akin to his true family since its members were connected by Loki's blood, making them no different from a blood-related family and her children, so staying there just felt right to him. But the Frenzel family was different. Riesel had no ties here, and the original Riesel had no connection whatsoever with this Marquis family, otherwise, he would have been ecstatic. Yuri was merely his savior, taking him in solely to allow him to recover from his injuries. It was a kind and well-intentioned gesture, but now that he had recovered, he didn't feel right staying here and continuing to trouble her any further. Being from a Marquis family, she had already shown great kindness by allowing a stranger and countryside boy like him to stay and recover. However, Yuri frowned at his answer. Is that really okay? Yuri stopped stirring her tea and met his gaze with a serious expression. There are still people outside who want to kill you. If you stay here, they might hesitate, but once you leave, they won't have any reason to hold back. In other words, leaving this mansion might immediately expose Riesel to danger in another assassination attempt. He couldn't be oblivious to this. But they are after me, not you. Riesel said indifferently. I don't want to trouble you anymore. I don't mind, you know. Yuri smiled slightly. It's rare to find a friend with whom I can have a conversation with. Even if you choose to stay, you're more than welcome. But I can't hide here forever, can I? Riesel looked directly at her eyes. I have to face this sooner or later. Hearing his resolute words, Yuri fell silent. Not just her, even Marilyn stealthily glanced at him, seemingly surprised by his words. What's wrong? Riesel found their reactions strange. Nothing. Yuri shook her head, sighing. I just feel that you're not quite like the rumors say. Riesel fell silent. He knew what she meant. As someone from a Marquis family, Yuri could easily investigate him and learn about his past, or rather, she had likely discovered what kind of person the original Riesel was. What kind of person was this world's Riesel? Someone with the courage to leave the countryside and travel far to the city in pursuit of a higher status, brave and ambitious. However, upon the discovery of his talents and the following flattery from the nobility, he lost his original purpose. He became arrogant, spending his days fooling around with a group of noble children, a countryside boy corrupted by the allure of the city. In the eyes of others, could someone like him be considered a good person? His manner and evaluations in the eyes of others were likely quite poor. But for Yuri, who had witnessed Riesel's various performances with her own eyes so far, such evaluations naturally differ. If the original Riesel had known that someone outside was spying on him, ready to kill him at any moment, he would have been scared to death by now. Even if Yuri urged him to leave, he wouldn't be willing to do so, no matter what. Moreover, upon seeing Yuri, an influential figure from a marquis family, he might have considered it a rare opportunity. If he could curry favor with someone from a marquis family, wouldn't he easily attain the position and privileges he desired? These were things the original Riesel would definitely have considered. Meanwhile, as Riesel was busy pondering matters concerning the original Riesel, Yuri suddenly spoke again. Even though you say that, I still think it's better for you to stay here for now. Her words prompted him to lift his gaze and glance over, and after a moment of silence, he threw a question. Have you investigated the one who targeted me? Yuri's words made Riesel consider that possibility. Unfortunately, he was about to be disappointed. Just like before, I couldn't find anything because they cleaned up their tracks really well. Yuri shook her head. But it's so tidy that I'm starting to suspect it might not just be some influential figure keeping an eye on you like we first thought. At her speculation, Riesel's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Yuri didn't answer immediately and seemed to be lost in thought, looking down at the cup of tea in front of her before finally asking a question. You should know who I am, right? At her question, Riesel couldn't help but pause, then truthfully provided an answer. In this kingdom, almost everyone knows you. You're the head of the Frenzel family, one of the marquis families in Genas. Plus, you're the chief court magician of this kingdom, holding the title of strategic class magician, one of the strongest magicians on the continent. Indeed, this was Yuri's true status and the reason he considered her one of the most impressive characters in this world. This seemingly rich young lady, though similar in age to him, was not some typical daughter of a marquis or an heir to the family. Instead, she had taken over the position of the Frenzel family's head and was granted the title of marquis personally by the king. The Frenzel family, once a fallen noble house, rose to prominence under this talented young lady, becoming a major noble in Genas, with authority over 10,000 people. Moreover, the reason she could achieve this was precisely because Yuri Frenzel, this extraordinary woman, was an exceptional character. Despite her young age, she possessed the power to become the chief court magician of the kingdom. 2 years ago, she became one of the most powerful magicians on the continent, earning the title of strategic class magician, causing a commotion throughout Genas. She could be considered the brightest and most dazzling star in Genas. However, upon hearing Riesel's answer, Yuri just laughed. The strongest magicians on the continent? Yuri said with a hint of self-deprecation. Just someone who can use magic most advantageous for war, that's all. Such a tool for war hardly qualifies as the strongest magician, right? Hearing her response, Riesel was at a loss for words. He understood why she would say such a thing. In this world, magic was generally divided into 3 classes. These 3 classes were combat class, tactical class, and strategic class. Combat class magic referred to lower power magic with a narrow attack range, suitable for one-on-one combat or small group battles. Tactical class magic had greater power and a wider attack range, capable of destroying a village in one blow or an entire army. Strategic class magic, on the other hand, was extremely powerful, with a broad attack range, capable of instantly destroying a city or even a small country. Although it might have seemed that strategic class magic was the strongest and combat class magic was the weakest, in reality, it was not the case. While strategic class magic was terrifyingly powerful, its conditions for casting were strict, making it almost impossible to use in a fight, especially a fast-paced one. Its only use was as a massive weapon of destruction for large-scale wars, akin to nuclear weapons. Combat class magic, although less powerful, had simple casting conditions and was the mainstream method in fights. Many magicians actually believed that mastering strategic class magic didn't necessarily make one the strongest, it was just a tool for war. A truly powerful magician was one who excelled in combat class magic. However, this perspective might have been popular in the magician circle but had little relevance in the view of countries. The reason was simple. In a world where numerous countries and forces vied for dominance on a continent in constant war, what mattered to a country was not an expert who could win fights one after another but a weapon that could be invincible on the battlefield and instantly destroy their enemies. Thanks to this, whether it was Genas or other countries, magicians capable of using tactical class and strategic class magic were highly valued. If a magician could use tactical class magic, they were instantly granted a noble title and welcomed into the kingdom. If a magician could use strategic class magic, that was even more incredible. The kingdom considered them a national treasure and, to win them over, the kingdom might even grant them a title of major noble, providing them with great privileges. The original Riesel had precisely this in mind when, upon discovering his abundant magical energy, left home without hesitation. Because to cast tactical class or strategic class magic, the primary requirement was a significant amount of magical energy within one body. Yuri was a successful example of this. Becoming a strategic class magician, she was regarded as one of the strongest magicians on the continent, securing the then current status of the Frenzel family. Yet, Yuri herself seemed indifferent to all this. Chapter 83, Heretic Assassin. As someone who inherited the memories of the original Riesel saw mostly positive memories about strategic class magicians from the original Riesel's perspective. No choice. The original Riesel came to the city to strive for success, all for the sake of becoming an elite, for becoming a noble. For commoners like him aspiring to be nobles, there were only a few methods. Either he had to achieve remarkable feats and receive the kingdom's recognition, or he had to climb high and either marry into nobility or join a noble family. Alternatively, he could make the kingdom value him and offer a title to win him over. The original Riesel chose the last method. With his naturally abundant magical energy, becoming a tactical class magician wasn't a very difficult task. In fact, with enough effort and talent, becoming a strategic class magician wasn't completely impossible either. If he could at least become a tactical class magician, he would immediately receive a promotion and a noble title, thus becoming a bona fide noble. Not to mention, if he could become a strategic class magician, he could be recognized as a national treasure of the entire genus, bestowed with the title of a major noble in existence like Yuri, one person above 10,000. With such calculations in mind, the original Riesel naturally harbored feelings of longing and admiration for strategic class magicians. Not only him, but most people in this world also held admiration and longing for strategic class magicians, considering them the most powerful magicians in the world. As long as they could smoothly unleash strategic class magic, they could instantly destroy a city or even a small country. This kind of power seemed no different from that of a god to the ordinary people. Only those lacking sufficient magical energy like combat class magicians, who no matter how hard they tried couldn't cast strategic class magic, would hold the belief that a true expert should specialize in combat class magic. Strategic class magic was merely a weapon for war, impractical and solely military-oriented, causing disdain among magicians who couldn't cast strategic class magic. This viewpoint wasn't entirely wrong. According to Riesel's understanding, the conditions for releasing strategic class magic were indeed strict. Just the chanting time alone was longer than even the lengthiest chants, often requiring several minutes or even tens of minutes of chanting for a single strategic class magic. Such lengthy chants and chanting times were impractical in the rapidly changing dynamics of combat. Let alone strategic class magic, even tactical class magic required a minute or several minutes of chanting time, making it unsuitable for fast-paced battles. Furthermore, combat class magic often only required a few seconds of chanting, and some were even chantless, making them entirely suitable for direct battle. In a one-on-one battle, a magician not proficient in combat class magic, even if they were a strategic class magician, could be easily defeated in an instant. Even losing to a street hooligan isn't an impossible scenario. As a result, tactical class magic and strategic class magic were almost useless in direct battle, only finding utility on the battlefield and in wars. Moreover, the power and scope of these two types of magic were too vast, making them unsuitable for use in densely populated areas. This was particularly true in the city, where using them would be a disaster. In principle, the major countries strictly prohibited the use of tactical class and strategic class magic without authorization. All of these made the situation quite interesting. In order to enhance national strength and increase the country's combat power and deterrence, major countries were desperate to recruit tactical class magicians and strategic class magicians. Yet, apart from wars, the use of tactical class magic and strategic class magic was strictly prohibited and not allowed. This had placed significant restrictions on many tactical class and strategic class magicians. Unless necessary, major countries may not even allow them to leave their territories without authorization. It could be said that tactical class and strategic class magicians were under constant surveillance wherever they went, whether by their own country or by other countries. Therefore, people like strategic class magicians were generally regarded as tools of war, despised by those beyond the ordinary residents. From Yuri's indifferent response, it was evident that she didn't find pride in her identity as a strategic class magician, even somewhat fed up with it. Riesel quietly sympathized with his savior in his heart and began to speak. "You suddenly mentioned your identity to me. Could this be related to me being attacked?" He considered this possibility, otherwise, why would Yuri bring up an identity she was not a fan of for no reason? Sure enough, there was a reason. While tactical class and strategic class magics are almost useless in direct battle, if used on the battlefield, their usefulness and supreme power are undeniable. Yuri explained with a sigh. Any country on the Akasha continent eagerly seeks magicians of these two classes. However, if an enemy country possesses such magicians, it poses a significant threat to them. Hearing that, Riesel immediately squinted his eyes. Are you saying that I was attacked because of that reason? Yes. Yuri nodded. Truthfully, I suspected it when you were attacked. It was only after I couldn't find any clues about the attacker that I thought the one who attacked you might be someone from the Heretic Assassin, who has recently become a topic of discussion. Heretic Assassin. Riesel was familiar with this name. It was because of an event that had occurred in the past few years. As Riesel began pondering, Yuri continued. In recent years, many people in major countries have been unexpectedly assassinated, dying under mysterious circumstances. Some were nobles, some were prodigies who gained fame. Although they seem unrelated, they have a common point: they are either tactical class magicians or those who have outstanding magical energy, with the potential to become tactical class or strategic class magicians. The sudden, unexplained deaths of these talented individuals had shaken various countries, and the news had spread throughout the entire continent, becoming a significant topic of discussion. Gradually, even ordinary residents came to know that there was a group of people who targeted tactical class magicians, strategic class magicians, and people with the potential to become both. Some suspect that they were secretly formed by one or multiple countries, operating as an assassination unit specifically targeting the war assets of foreign countries. Some believe they are a self-formed criminal group of combat class magicians who failed to become tactical class or strategic class magicians, driven by motives of revenge and frustration. There are also those who speculate that they oppose the use of magic in war, opposing the excessive focus on tactical class and strategic class magic by major countries. They united as terrorists to change this phenomenon. This is the Heretic Assassin, an underground organization that has gained a reputation in recent years. The reason Yuri suspected that this organization targeted Riesel was because of their objectives. Their targets were users of tactical class and strategic class magic, as well as people who have the potential to become proficient in both. Riesel happened to fit these criteria. Each time they act, their cleanup is remarkably thorough. After several years, no country can uncover anything, suggesting that one or more countries likely support them. This was her reason for believing that the Heretic Assassin was behind Riesel's assassination. The attackers shared many similarities. The cleanup was executed too well, suggesting the support of at least one country behind them. Even the Frenzel family's intelligence network couldn't find anything. If it's indeed them targeting you, leaving here is definitely not a good choice. Yuri advised seriously. Your enemy is a terrorist organization on a national level, and you won't be able to handle them alone. Hearing her reasoning, Riesel's brow furrowed deeply. His current situation was indeed tricky. While he wasn't afraid, if his attacker was truly such a big terrorist organization, he wouldn't be arrogant enough to think he could handle everything alone. Their unexpected strength, with his current strength, might only allow him to defend himself temporarily, not forever. He was not reckless, blindly plunging into danger without considering the consequences. If there was a solid reason, he could risk everything for a challenge, but without a necessary reason, he wouldn't recklessly face big danger. This wasn't an adventure, it was just falling into someone else's conspiracy, deceit, and malice. Unfortunately, he detested these kinds of things the most. Stay here for now. Yuri said gently, looking at his furrowed brow. I've secretly leaked information about your injuries. If all goes well, you should be out of danger soon. Injuries? Riesel was puzzled at first, then realized. You mean the damage to my gate? Yep. Yuri chuckled. Your gate is damaged, so you can't use magic anymore. Maybe this isn't entirely a bad thing. If this news reached the ears of the Heretic Assassin's people, they might abandon any plans to assassinate him. After all, their goal was people capable of using tactical class and strategic class magics, and without the ability to use magic, Riesel would lose his value as their target. Just stay hidden here for a while, there's no shame in it, you know. Yuri suggested. What about you? Riesel asked, looking into her eyes. If it's indeed them, aren't you their target too? Aren't you afraid? Yuri, being a strategic class magician, logically should be the Heretic Assassin's primary target. However, have you ever heard of a strategic class magician being killed so far? Yuri casually tossed out a question, leaving him in silence. In the Akasha continent, there were only 8 existing strategic class magicians, and all of them were still alive and well. Don't worry. Even if I wanted to die, this kingdom wouldn't allow it. Yuri sarcastically remarked before continuing. Just stay here for now, wait until the storm passes, and then make different plans. Upon hearing that, Riesel considered for a moment and nodded. Staying here might be a good idea since this way he could have an easier time delving into the power system of this world. Is this settled then? Yuri asked, seeing him nod, and seemed pleased. Come, join me for afternoon tea. As he looked at the tea in front of him, his complexion stiffened. In that split second, he began to question whether his decision was a mistake. Chapter 84, The Library. Okay, let's set aside the matter of tea for now. Ignoring the excessively sweet black tea, Riesel was genuinely grateful for Yuri's kindness. Not only did she save his life, but she also welcomed him to stay, providing temporary protection. He was determined to remember this favor. Therefore, he didn't rush to leave and sat in the pavilion, engaging in conversation with her. He observed that she genuinely enjoyed talking with him. Perhaps she simply liked having someone with whom she could chat freely, and he happened to be that person. When he was still recovering from his injuries, she often came to visit him. Sometimes they discussed important matters, while other times they engaged in casual conversation. Regardless, she always appeared happy. Considering Yuri's status as a marquis and a renowned strategic class magician on the Akasha continent, why would she personally visit him and engage in conversation with someone like him? Even if she rescued someone and brought them back for recovery out of kindness, it wasn't necessary for her to personally check on them. Instructing others to take care of him would have been sufficient. Hence, as Riesel could sense Yuri's goodwill, he was willing to play along. They chatted, relieving boredom and providing a distraction. Initially, she might have only shown interest in him due to his potential to become a tactical class or strategic class magician. However, as their interactions increased, her visits became more frequent. Now, simply sitting with him, chatting and having tea, made her content and happy, leaving him unsure how to react. However, since she enjoyed talking to him, Riesel naturally did so. It was also an opportunity for him to learn about this world and understand Gina's through her perspective. The original Riesel, a naive countryside peasant with limited knowledge, only possessed basic common sense. In contrast, Yuri, a high-ranking noble of the kingdom and chief court magician, had an understanding of the country and continent that others couldn't match. During the month of recovery, Riesel learned a lot about this world through conversations with Yuri. Engaging in conversation with her now also proved beneficial for him, allowing him to quickly grasp the intricacies of this world and learn some hidden truths. Until... My lady! An old butler entered the pavilion, bowing to Yuri as he spoke. The son of the Basalo family has come to visit. With these words, the joyful expression instantly vanished from Yuri's face. I know. Yuri responded expressionlessly. Escort him to the guest room, I will be there shortly. Yes. The butler responded curtly, retreating. Yuri's face regained expression, though it seemed less than pleased. What's wrong? Riesel inquired, observing the situation. Nothing. Yuri intended to say something, but after a moment's thought, she seemed to dismiss the idea and sighed. I'm sorry, I need to attend to a guest. It was evident that this so-called guest was not someone she welcomed. It's okay. Riesel, though somewhat concerned, didn't want to press further. You go ahead, I'll be fine on my own. Yuri smiled. You can return to your room or wander around, just don't leave this mansion. You're free to go anywhere within this building. As she spoke, she took out a crystal from her pocket. This is for you. Yuri handed the crystal to him. Examining it, Riesel soon expressed his surprise. Is this a magic crystal for communication? Phew, yes. Yuri chuckled. Consider it a gift. If you ever need to, you can use it to contact me. But isn't this too much? Riesel hesitated. I remember this thing is quite expensive. Magic crystals were items similar to the magic stones in the world of Danmachi. They were raw materials for making magic items, allowing various magical effects to be inscribed, creating a variety of special items for convenience in daily life, and many more. The magic crystal she gave to him was for communication, allowing conversation regardless of distance. As long as the crystal had touched before, it would record the toucher's magical energy wavelength. In comparison to the limited signal range of phones and cell phones from his previous life, this magical item was far superior. Though there was the inconvenience of having to touch crystals to record magical energy wavelengths, the ability to have a conversation anywhere outweighed the drawbacks. T/N, like saving phone numbers. The original Riesel, despite being friendly with many noble children, did not possess a communication magic crystal himself. Therefore, he knew how expensive this item was. However, for Yuri, it seemed like a trivial issue. "Ah, this little thing is nothing, I have plenty. Marilyn has one too, so don't hesitate to use it." Yuri smiled warmly. It's for the sake of easy communication. Now that he wouldn't simply lie in bed, there was a need for a way to contact others. "I've already recorded my wavelength in this magic crystal, and Marilyn's as well. If it's inconvenient to contact me, you can also reach out to her." Yuri's words made Riesel glance at Marilyn. However, Marilyn, who stood by Yuri's side, seemed indifferent, as if completely unaware of his gaze. "All right." After some consideration, Riesel ultimately accepted Yuri's good intentions and took the magic crystal. "Oh, by the way." Yuri suddenly remembered something. "If you find yourself bored, you can go check out the library." However, upon hearing that, Marilyn's expression unexpectedly changed. "My lady." Marilyn furrowed her brows and wanted to say something, but Yuri silenced her with a glance. "What's wrong with this library?" Riesel asked with a slight bewilderment as he observed Marilyn's reaction. "Nothing, don't worry." Yuri chuckled, shaking her head. "It won't harm you in any way. Whether you want to go or not is up to you." Leaving those words behind, she stood up, turned, and walked away. Surprisingly, Marilyn glared silently at Riesel and then left somewhat indignantly. Alone in the pavilion, he watched the departing master and servant, lost in thought. It seems like this so-called library is not a place one can enter casually. After deliberation, Riesel decided to check it out. Just as Yuri had said, he didn't believe she would harm him, otherwise, he would have died long ago. As a result, he left the pavilion, ready to enter the mansion for the library. However, before entering the mansion, he encountered many people. Outside the gate, at a distance from the courtyard, there was not only a luxurious carriage but also many people dressed as knights, standing in a tidy formation. After glancing and finding nothing interesting, Riesel entered the mansion. The Frenzel family's library seemed to be on the top floor of this luxurious mansion. It was located next to Yuri's exclusive study, not too secluded in position. However, when Riesel asked the servants about the library's location, they looked at him with surprise. Shortly afterward, they notified the bodyguard, who came over to inquire. Upon learning that he was seeking the library with Yuri's permission, the bodyguards exchanged bewildered glances and then directed him in the right direction. As Riesel left, he distinctly observed envy and even jealousy in their eyes. Though, he didn't know why, he didn't care and continued his journey. Later, on his way to the top floor, he encountered about 3 waves of people who tried to stop him. Each time, they only allowed him to pass after confirming he had Yuri's permission. This further convinced him that this library was undoubtedly an important place. Strangely, for such an important place, there were surprisingly few people guarding its entrance. Riesel, puzzled, examined the library's door before pushing it open and stepping inside. At this moment, he failed to notice that as he opened the door, a tiny magic circle appeared for a split second on the door handle. The magic circle flashed briefly, appearing and disappearing so quickly that he didn't catch the abnormality. After Riesel entered the library door closed automatically behind him. Inside, he surveyed the entire library. It was a very ordinary-looking library. Not too large but not small either, filled with numerous books neatly arranged on exquisite bookshelves. However, strangely, there was no scent of paper in the air. Approaching one of the bookshelves, Riesel picked up a book. As he held it, he finally understood why people in this mansion were so nervous about the library. It was because the books here were all unique. For instance, the book he held in his hands now was titled Introduction to Elementary Magic. Yes. This was a magic book that taught people how to use magic and provided guidance on how to become a magician. Are all the books here some kind of magic book for teaching magic? Riesel's gaze at the library changed instantly. Was this really a library? It seemed more like a place of magic knowledge inheritance. No, it wasn't just about magic knowledge. Riesel discovered that on one shelf, there were books related not to magic but to swordsmanship. swordsmanship. Riesel suddenly became interested. If the original Riesel's memory was correct, then swordsmanship in this world was something special. Chapter 85, Swordsmanship. Life began with magical energy. This was the common sense of this world. However, the amount of magical energy one possessed varied, some had more and some had less. The amount remained constant throughout one's lifetime and wouldn't increase, no matter what one did. Therefore, even though everyone in this world had magical energy, very few could become magicians. In this world, approximately 90% of people had so little magical energy that they couldn't even release the simplest form of magic. Among the remaining 10%, roughly 90% of them would exhaust all their magical energy even if they were to release a single magic. As a result, there were very few magicians because people with enough magical energy were scarce. This was a matter of fate, and despite any unwillingness, reality remained unchangeable. So, were those without the ability to use magic destined to live ordinary lives? Certainly not. In this world, there was a system designed for those who could not become magicians: swordsmanship. The swordsmanship in this world was not just a technique or skill, it was a method of honing one body. By practicing swordsmanship, people could stimulate the magical energy inside their bodies that could not be used for magic. They channeled all their magical energy into refining their bodies, honing their physical prowess, and thus gaining superhuman power. Those born with abundant magical energy could become magicians. Those born with insufficient magical energy could become swordsmen. These were two different paths that led to extraordinary powers. The former required innate talent, while the latter emphasized effort and circumstances. This world was a world of swords and magic, with no third power system. Riesel found the swordsmanship in this world interesting. After all, he himself was a swordsman. Let's take a look at this world's swordsmanship. Riesel set down the magic book in his hands. While these magic books might be worth thousands of gold, to be honest, they held little significance for him. His gait was damaged, rendering him unable to independently practice this world's magic. Moreover, he was not inclined to study it. If he truly needed any magic, he could simply memorize it with Almighty, using the stored memory to unleash the magic through it. As a result, there was no need for him to rigorously study magic. Knowing the specific effect of the magic was enough. Afterward, he could have someone demonstrate the said magic in front of him. When using magic memorized with Almighty, Riesel would spend his mind, not the magical energy from the damaged gate. This meant that even if his gate was compromised, it wouldn't restrict him at all. As a result, his interest in the magic books in this library was minimal. Instead, he found himself more intrigued by the swordsmanship. Without delay, he approached another shelf that held books on swordsmanship and picked one up. The collection wasn't extensive. Compared to the magic books, the number of swordsmanship books in this library was overwhelmingly low, around 10 to 20. Riesel picked up one of them and started reading. Indeed, the book documented a particular swordsmanship, along with explanations. Swordsmanship encompasses all techniques that utilize the magical energy within one's body to temper and enhance physical strength. Practicing swordsmanship can rapidly enhance one's body, enabling even those with limited magical energy to elevate themselves and become extraordinary beings. Swordsmanship is mainly divided into three classes. 1. Elementary swordsmanship. 2. Advanced swordsmanship. 3. Special swordsmanship. Practicing different types of swordsmanship leads to different growth and outcomes. Riesel quickly scanned through the summary and discovered that the swordsmanship system had its own difficulties. As mentioned in the book, swordsmanship classes existed, with the growth being slower for elementary swordsmanship and faster for advanced swordsmanship. This was primarily due to the varying levels of magical energy stimulation by the swordsmanship, which affected the efficiency of tempering the body using magical energy. Elementary swordsmanship had a lower stimulation of magical energy, resulting in slower growth, while advanced swordsmanship had a higher stimulation, leading to faster growth. Especially when practicing special swordsmanship, according to the book, the practitioner's growth speed would be unimaginably fast. Excessive stimulation of magical energy could even cause the practitioner to manifest supernatural phenomena when using sword techniques, giving it traits and effects similar to magic. For example, someone who practiced special swordsmanship might infuse wind into their slashes, creating blasts of storm. Another might unleash flames into their slashes, resembling the effects of flame magic, resulting in explosive improvements in powers. The book mentioned one such special swordsmanship. The swordsmanship passed down by the royal family of Genas is a type that can cultivate spiritual power. Once mastered, even without using a sword to attack, one can evoke spiritual power to intimidate enemies, even stunning them. Ordinary people facing members of the royal family often feel the invisible pressure of spiritual power before even making physical contact. Even if they don't lose consciousness immediately, their strength is greatly diminished, and only 1 out of 10 survives. Such special swordsmanship exists in various countries, with only minor differences in quantity. Regardless of the type, as long as one practices special swordsmanship, they have the potential to become the strongest swordsman and attain the title of Sword Saint in due time. Sword Saint is the highest honor for a swordsman, a title achievable only by those with the ability to vie for the strongest position. If a strategic class magician is considered the strongest force in wars, then a Sword Saint is the strongest force in one-on-one combat. In other words, those who gain the title of Sword Saint are nearly invincible in duels. Once, in pursuit of the title of Sword Saint, countless swordsmen confronted each other, engaging in intense fights, leading to many historically significant bloody events. Just as strategic class magicians are considered the strongest magicians in the world, Sword Saints are also perceived as the strongest swordsmen. With a multitude of swordsmen in this world vying for the title, the competition for the strongest is fierce and intense. A small mistake could even result in a disaster. Of course, only swordsmen who have practiced special swordsmanship have the qualifications to compete for the title of Sword Saint. Ordinary swordsmen are not eligible. Due to the unique nature of special swordsmanship, most of these great swordsmanship have been collected by the royal families of major countries or are held by powerful noble families. They rarely end up in the hands of outsiders. Is there special swordsmanship here? Riesel became more interested as he put down the swordsmanship book in his hands. The swordsmanship described in this book was advanced swordsmanship, quite valuable for ordinary people, and much better than elementary swordsmanship at least. However, compared to special swordsmanship, it was not considered much. Riesel had a faint suspicion. Yuri asked me to come to this library, maybe so I could look up swordsmanship here. His gate was already damaged and couldn't be used for magic anymore, confirming the fact that he couldn't be a magician again. Although Yuri mentioned that there were treasures in this world that could repair a damaged gate and that there was hope of using magic again if found, she hadn't found these treasures yet. This implied that such items were extremely rare and not easily found or obtained. Without finding such treasures, did that mean Riesel would be a useless person for the rest of his life? Yuri wouldn't want to see that happen. Hence, she suggested to him to come here and focus on practicing swordsmanship. Practicing swordsmanship could independently trigger magical energy. Even if his gate was damaged, it wouldn't pose any hindrance. Throughout history, many magicians whose gate was damaged eventually succeeded in transitioning to swordsmen. Extraordinary individuals who changed their path and became sword saints often had similar experiences. Yuri, recognizing this potential, extended the opportunity to Riesel. Unbeknownst to her, he also harbored the desire to practice swordsmanship from the beginning. Even though my gate is damaged and I don't rely on it much for magic practice at the moment, this body naturally has plenty of magical energy. It'd be a shame not to make use of it. With Riesel's innate abundance of magical energy, his growth speed after practicing swordsmanship would also be remarkable. Swordsmanship was initially designed for those with low magical energy, but people with abundant magical energy could still excel in it. While others struggled daily to practice swordsmanship, using their meager magical energy to refine their body, those who possessed abundant magical energy could achieve far more. Yuri likely thought it would be a waste not to make use of Riesel's innately abundant magical energy and thus entertained the idea of assisting him in practicing swordsmanship. If that was the case, perhaps there was a powerful swordsmanship she specifically left for him in this library. Riesel quickly scanned the bookshelf for swordsmanship books and eventually found the one in a hidden corner. Holy Dragon Sword Style. This was a long-standing special swordsmanship. Riesel's eyes brightened as he opened the book. Upon opening it, he saw an image of a swordsman confronting a great dragon, preparing for dragon slaying. Below the image, there was a caption. Holy Dragon Sword Style, a special swordsmanship created by Dragon Sword Saint Efeston Tussin Lo, has been passed down for 400 years. When Dragon Sword Saint mastered the Holy Dragon Sword Style, his body was honed to rival that of a great dragon. He even possessed magic resistance equivalent to a dragon. Even direct hits from tactical class magic left no scars on his body. This swordsmanship has an extremely high difficulty and requires huge innate magical energy. Without sufficient magical energy, one cannot successfully practice it throughout their life. For newcomers wishing to practice this swordsmanship, it is crucial not to blindly train. Chapter 86, Disappointment. At this moment, Riesel was stunned. He had never expected that the special swordsmanship he had found in this library would be such an extraordinary one, a swordsmanship that could transform one's body like a dragon. Practicing swordsmanship and becoming a dragon? What kind of concept was this? Regardless, his first impression was disbelief, but shortly afterward, excitement crept in. The fact that the requirements for practicing this swordsmanship aligned with him, needing individuals with abundant magical energy, made him even more intrigued. Ordinary people wouldn't stand a chance of successfully practicing it. Could it be that Yuri specifically chose this swordsmanship for me? Riesel couldn't help but think so and decided he would ask about this later. For now, he was eager to see and learn this special swordsmanship. As for the warning about the extremely high difficulty of practice mentioned in the captions, he chose to ignore it. With the existence of Fool's Obsession, his growth speed and limits were significantly boosted. If he couldn't master this swordsmanship, then perhaps no one could. With that mindset, Riesel started reading the Holy Dragon Sword style. However, as he read further, his eyebrows began to furrow, and the excitement in his eyes gradually faded. No fucking way. This swordsmanship is actually missing the crucial breathing style. Riesel thought speechlessly. Yes, this swordsmanship had a flaw. Swordsmanship typically consists of two essential components: the swordsmanship itself and the breathing technique, also known as the breathing style. All swordsmanship in this world involves practicing sword techniques while employing a specific breathing technique to stimulate magical energy within one's body. This approach enhances magical energy, invigorating the body and gradually enhancing its power, step by step. In other words, the breathing style in swordsmanship was the key to allowing practitioners to transcend the ordinary. Without a breathing style, any swordsmanship was just a common sword technique, a set of moves, or skills. While it might have contributed to the body, it lacked the stimulating effect of magical energy and the refining effect on the body. Naturally, without a breathing style, even if one practiced special swordsmanship, it was impossible to develop special abilities like releasing flame or wind into their sword slashes. It might have even lacked the said astonishing growth efficiency. The Holy Dragon Sword style in Riesel's hands was missing this crucial breathing style, leaving only sword moves and sword techniques. Such special swordsmanship, not to mention being stronger than advanced swordsmanship, fell short even when compared to elementary swordsmanship without the accompanying breathing style. In short, this Holy Dragon Sword style was nothing more than a disappointment. Why is the breathing style that should be the most important missing? Riesel pondered. Could it be intentionally separated and stored elsewhere? If that were true, wouldn't it mean that Yuri didn't bring him here to learn this special swordsmanship? Riesel felt a bit confused. Whatever, let's go ask. He decided to not dwell on it. If there were questions, he would just go and ask her directly. However, Riesel decided to memorize the Holy Dragon Sword style. With his extraordinary memory, even if he didn't take the book out of the library, he could recall all the content after spending some time. Done. About half an hour later, he closed his eyes, recalled the memorized information, confirmed its accuracy, put back the book of Holy Dragon Sword style on the shelf, and left. At this moment, the sky was still early. After leaving the library, Riesel had initially planned to go directly to find Yuri. However, considering that she was likely entertaining a guest at this moment, he abandoned this plan and headed toward the courtyard. He wanted to practice the Holy Dragon Sword style in the courtyard for a while, to see if there was anything special about this special swordsmanship that lacked the crucial breathing style. With nothing else to do and no dungeon to challenge in this world, Riesel could only use this method for training and confirmation, while passing the time. However, just as he descended the stairs, preparing to go to the first floor, he was intercepted by someone. Hello. A middle-aged man with a beard, dressed like a steward and somewhat resembling a shrewd merchant, stopped Riesel. You are? Riesel stopped in his tracks, looking at the man with a merchant-like appearance. I am the steward of the Basalo family. The Basalo family's steward bowed to Riesel, his face full of smiles, but his tone carried an imperceptible arrogance. Basalo family? Riesel raised his eyebrows. Wasn't that the family to which the son, whom Yuri didn't particularly like, belonged? Do you have business with me? Riesel asked straightforwardly, not displaying a hostile attitude but not overly humble either. There is indeed a something. The steward, seeing Riesel's calm demeanor, looked a bit disappointed, but still smiled. Young master, since you can freely move around here, your status should be quite high, right? I'm just a guest here, living here temporarily. Nothing to do with status. Riesel answered indifferently. If you have something to say it directly, no need for beating around the bush. If that's the case, then I'll be direct. The steward suddenly approached with a smile, handing over a heavy pouch to Riesel. Please accept this, young master. Upon seeing the pouch, Riesel's heart stirred. Although he hadn't seen what was inside the heavy pouch he held, judging from the feel, it was likely to be coins, like the currency circulating in Orario. He had brought money before, so he could naturally judge from the touch what was inside. But what does this mean? Riesel raised the heavy money pouch in his hand, a look of intrigue shining in his eyes as he gazed at the steward. The steward seemed not to notice and simply touched his own beard, smiling. This is just a small deposit, you can do anything with it. The steward said with an apologetic smile. If you feel it's not enough, then you can provide a bit of information to me, and I'll certainly add a little more. Information, hey? Riesel raised an eyebrow. Such as? For example, some information related to Marquis Frenzel. The steward blinked, displaying a look of you know what I mean on his face. It could be anything, from personal hobbies to family secrets. As long as you are willing to reveal it to our Basalo family, my young master will surely reward you generously. Upon hearing that, Riesel knew exactly what the steward of the Basalo family's intention was. He wanted to gather information about Yuri. Whether it was personal hobbies or family secrets, he was interested in it all. As for why he was gathering this information, it was not hard to guess that it wasn't for anything good. Thinking back to Yuri's displeasure when she heard someone was visiting, Riesel suddenly understood her a bit. Undoubtedly, this Basalo family must have done such things quite often. All right. Riesel smirked, collecting the heavy money pouch in his hand. Although I don't know any family secrets, I do know a personal hobby of Yuri, I mean, Marquis Frenzel. What is it? The steward became energetic instantly. Marquis Frenzel seems to enjoy drinking unique flavored black tea. Riesel expressionlessly said. Such as the very bitter kind. She seems quite fond of it. Very bitter black tea, is it? The steward was slightly stunned. Are there people out there who actually enjoy bitter tea? That's why I called it unique. Riesel chuckled. If someone can accompany Marquis Frenzel for her favorite afternoon tea, her mood will surely be excellent. I see. The steward nodded understandingly and then smiled. Thank you for the information, young master. I'll look for you next time. With that, the steward left with enthusiasm, leaving only Riesel behind. So, this is the nobility of this kingdom, hey? Riesel muttered as he watched the steward's departing figure. In his tone, there was a mixture of annoyance and sarcasm. The steward's demeanor and behavior once again reminded him of some unpleasant experiences from his previous life. TCH, whatever, it's none of my business. Riesel turned and left. Right now, he just wanted to practice swordsmanship, that way, he could properly dispel the slight frustration building up in his heart. Swish! In the courtyard, next to the pavilion, Riesel wielded a wooden sword, dancing with the sword skillfully. He started with a downward slash, followed by a quick lift and a diagonal cut. After a swift return, he executed a powerful thrust, causing the air to whistle. As he swung the sword, not only was his speed surprisingly quick, but there was also a sense of powerful and forceful momentum. Whether slashing or thrusting, it felt like an explosive burst of power. When Riesel finally stopped, he realized that practicing swordsmanship in this manner had left him drenched in sweat after just one session. This holy dragon sword style is no joke. Riesel commented inwardly, somewhat amazed. Being able to use all muscles with just a few movements and having such a marvelous power application technique, no wonder it's considered special swordsmanship. Examining the effects of training with the holy dragon sword style, Riesel was surprised at its effectiveness. This swordsmanship is far superior to Ace's swordsmanship. If continued, it might yield some amazing results. Riesel felt both astonished and regretful. Continuing like this, even at my level, could have some benefits, right? He marveled at the thought and felt a tinge of disappointment. Unfortunately, the most important breathing style is missing, otherwise, this swordsmanship would be incredibly strong. Without the breathing style, he still experienced some benefits, but he still wondered whether the absence of the breathing style was intentional or accidental. While practicing, Riesel casually contemplated this matter. However, after a while, he noticed a sudden commotion. I won't give up. Miss Yuri. A young man dressed as a noble suddenly appeared at the mansion's gate, shouting toward the inside. Accompanying him was the shady-looking steward from before, voicing support. Riesel paused his movement, observing the noble-dressed young man. The young man continued yelling and causing a ruckus, soliciting assistance from his escort. Before long, Yuri emerged from the mansion. However, her expression didn't look too pleased. Chapter 87, Marriage Proposal? Riesel had no idea what Yuri and the young master of the Basalo family had discussed. The distance was too far, and unless the young master and his subordinates shouted loudly as they did just now, he couldn't hear any sound. However, Yuri's complexion didn't look good. Riesel could tell that she had said something to the young master with a cold expression that made him particularly excited, continuously exclaiming phrases like "No. It's impossible, and I will never give up." That appearance, how to describe it? It was like a devoted dog rejected by his goddess. In fact, it really seemed like that. Shaking his head to disperse these useless thoughts, Riesel stopped paying attention to the commotion and continued practicing swordsmanship by the pavilion. Each practice session left him sweating, yet due to the rapid stamina recovery thanks to the healing power development ability, he felt no exhaustion. It was indeed a peculiar sensation. After practicing like this for about half an hour, the Basalo family's young master, who resembled a defeated dog, finally ran off with tears and snot, leaving his steward and subordinates hastily chasing after him. Not long after, the luxurious carriage parked outside the door was driven away, and the neatly arranged knights followed suit, creating quite a stir. Only then did Riesel put down his sword, wipe the sweat off his forehead, and look at Yuri's figure. She remained standing at the mansion's entrance, her expression unchanged even as the Basalo family's people departed. She conversed with Marilyn, or rather, issued some instructions, only letting Marilyn leave later. Shortly afterward, Yuri finally made eye contact with Riesel. It was only at this moment that her expression eased a bit, with a lingering sense of helplessness in her eyes as she walked toward him. "You've been here the whole time?" Yuri asked with a casual tone as she sat down in the pavilion, observing Riesel, who was drenched in sweat and holding a wooden sword. "Yet." Riesel shrugged, placing the wooden sword borrowed from the bodyguard aside. "Your suitor or something?" He was, of course, referring to the son and the so-called young master of the Basalo family. "I guess so." Yuri expressed indifference, her tone plain. "A troublesome one." Riesel smirked, tossing a money pouch onto the table. "I find him pretty straightforward, you know. Managed to bribe his way to me. I'm guessing people in this mansion must have been bothered quite a bit by his people." At his words, Yuri remained silent, only staring at the money pouch on the table with an expression of annoyance. Without a doubt, such incidents were not occurring for the first time. After a long while, she suddenly spoke. "I have to return home." Yuri's words initially surprised Riesel, but he quickly understood. To the Frenzel territory. As a Marquis of Genas, the Frenzel family naturally possessed territory. Located to the north of Genas, the climate was cold, not with constant snowfall but characterized by a perpetual winter, making it unsuitable for a large population. Considering Yuri's status and position, she could have requested a central territory from the kingdom, but she didn't. Despite the Frenzel family's decline, they still held on to their own land. After being granted a marquis title, Yuri reclaimed her family's ancestral territory and didn't seek additional land. This led to the Frenzel family's holdings being in remote areas within Genas. The main residence of the Frenzel family was within that territory, while the current mansion in the royal capital served as their secondary one. In other words, Riesel was currently in the Frenzel family's secondary residence in Genas's royal capital. Due to her role as the chief court magician, Yuri often had to leave her territory to handle work in the royal capital, hence her ownership of a mansion here. Now, she seemed prepared to leave the royal capital and return to her territory. Riesel couldn't believe that this had nothing to do with that young master of the Basalo family. "What's going on, really?" Riesel finally asked the crucial question. Yuri seemed reluctant to speak, but seeing his direct and sincere gaze, she fell silent for a while before sighing. "The Basalo family has proposed a marriage alliance to my family," Yuri said in a grim mood. "It seems my family has agreed." Upon hearing this, Riesel's expression became peculiar. "What? Your family agreed to a marriage proposed by someone else?" Riesel questioned in a surprised tone. "Can they even decide such things for you?" One couldn't blame him for saying so. If Yuri were just a mere wealthy daughter from a noble family, it wouldn't be unusual for her family to arrange a marriage. Noble families were often involved in such alliances. However, the peculiarity arose from the fact that it concerned Yuri. The reason was simple. In the Frenzel family, Yuri was the head of the family. Because she took over the Frenzel family, becoming a strategic class magician, the kingdom regarded her as a treasure, and it was because of her that the family had its current standing. Therefore, she was the sky of the Frenzel family, the true ruler and a decisive master. In the Frenzel family, who had the authority to decide her marriage? Perhaps even the king of Genas himself, when considering arranging a marriage, had to take into account Yuri's mood. Otherwise, if this strategic class magician became discontent, it would be a disastrous situation for the kingdom. In such a situation, who could decide to marry her off? Riesel's evaluation of her as one of the most impressive characters in this world was not just a casual remark. It was understandable that he seemed to be getting a bit confused. My father agreed to this without my consent. With just one sentence, Yuri revealed to him how helpless she was. However, after saying that, she noticed that his complexion had also become somewhat unpleasant. What's wrong? Yuri asked doubtfully. It's nothing. Naturally, Riesel wouldn't tell her that her words reminded him of his grandfather's unilateral decision in his previous life, forcing him to marry the overweight daughter of a nouveau-riche family. So, you're going back to oppose this marriage? Riesel asked as he understood why she suddenly decided to go back. To his question, she has only one response. Without my consent, this so-called marriage won't stand. Yuri's indifferent words were entirely different from her usual demeanor in front of Riesel. In front of him, she appeared as a girl who lacked friends, enjoyed chatting with friends, and found happiness even in small things. But at this moment, she was a strong and cold head of a major noble family. This was the true nature of the girl, a facade she usually displayed in front of others. Then I wish you a safe journey. Riesel could only say a farewell. However. What are you talking about? Yuri said somewhat oddly. Aren't you coming with me too? Hey? Me? Why? Riesel was taken aback, pointing at himself. Of course. Yuri chuckled as she looked at his surprised expression, her mood finally improving. Are you planning to stay here and wait to be attacked by that so-called heretic assassin? Doesn't this place have a magic defense system? Riesel was genuinely puzzled. It should be safe for me to stay here, right? That's when I'm here. Yuri explained. The magic defense system in this residence is set up to protect me and operates fully only when I'm present. Once I leave, the defense system automatically shuts down most of its functions to conserve energy. It's a magic program set by the kingdom's court magicians when they arranged the defense system in this residence. Even I can't control it. With that explanation, she found it necessary to take him along for his safety. You must be kidding, right? Riesel was speechless. Nope, I'm serious. Yuri said, quite amused. You don't want to come home with me? Hat. Riesel laughed lightly and rolled his eyes, which was rare. Was this a question of willingness? No, it was a matter of reason. In what way and reason should I go home with you? As a homeless guy you brought in from outside or something? Riesel said with a raised eyebrow. PFTTT. His words made Yuri's burst into laughter. But that was not wrong. Being brought home by a woman of similar age, neither relative nor friend, would easily lead to misunderstandings. In the medieval era, especially, bringing in someone unclear from the outside could be a matter of great seriousness, almost as severe as being mistaken for a criminal. Okay. Yuri thought for a moment. I'll tell people at home that I invited you home as a guest in the name of a friend from the academy. Friend from the academy? Riesel was stunned. You do know, right? Yuri smiled and said, I used to be a student at Spriller Academy. Although we're the same age, I graduated early. Strictly speaking, I can be considered your senior, no. At her words, Riesel was at a loss. Spriller Academy was regarded as the most prestigious national magic school on the continent. There were 4 such magic schools in total on the Akasha continent, each established by one of the 4 major countries and located within their respective capitals. Spriller Academy, founded by Genas, stood as the most prestigious magic school, and it was the very place attended by the original Riesel. Yuri, on the other hand, had already graduated early, making her his senior. All right, come home with me, Junior, Yuri said with a teasing smile. I'll take good care of you. Hearing her teasing, Riesel's eye corner twitched, and he didn't feel like talking anymore. Chapter 88, Bodyguards. After discussing the matter of returning home with Riesel, Yuri finally left. Though she mentioned wanting to go home, given her status, returning to her territory involved many arrangements in the royal capital that needed to be taken care of first. Otherwise, even if she wanted to leave, it wouldn't be possible. At the very least, she needed to visit the royal palace and report the matter. Otherwise, as a chief court magician and a strategic class magician, leaving the royal capital without authorization might cause unnecessary trouble. This made Riesel understand a bit more why she sarcastically referred to herself as a tool of war. She indeed gained status, privileges, fame, and popularity, but at the same time, she lost her freedom. Nobility, hey! Riesel sighed softly in the pavilion, and shortly afterward, he suddenly remembered something. Crap, I forgot to ask about the Holy Dragon sword style. It seemed that this matter would have to be temporarily set aside. Yuri's current mood was not particularly pleasant, and Riesel was not eager to trouble his benefactor for his own concerns. Never mind, I'll ask next time. He was not in a hurry, so decided to resume his practice. He picked up a wooden sword placed beside him and began swinging it again. First, he would master the swordsmanship in the Holy Dragon sword style. That would never be a wrong choice. Even if the crucial breathing style was missing, mastering the swordsmanship would still increase his strength. If he later had the opportunity to obtain the breathing style, he could seamlessly integrate it, skipping the familiarization process entirely. This was a genuine practice of special swordsmanship that could transform one's body ache into a dragon. As a result, Riesel practiced the swordsmanship over and over again until it was nearly dark. The next day, he experienced what it meant to have sore muscles. Practicing the Holy Dragon sword style actually made my muscles sore. Riesel wasn't frustrated, instead, he felt happy. If it could make his muscles sore, it meant that this swordsmanship indeed affected him. This motivated him to decide that starting from today, he would practice the Holy Dragon sword style every day. Without the dungeon, there's no way to grow through defeating monsters. I can only persist in training like this. Self-training also served as a means to enhance status. Fauna acted as both an accelerator and a stimulus for the growth of abilities. With regular use of a particular ability, one could gain experience and results. When updating the status, Excelia could be extracted from this factor to enhance it. Persisting in daily training like this would allow his status to grow even without defeating monsters or enemies. If there's a way to acquire the Holy Dragon sword skills breathing style and practice this special swordsmanship, even if not hunting monsters, my status could rapidly grow, and there might even be a chance to level up. After all, transforming oneself into a dragon through swordsmanship could be considered a great exploit, right? Of course, it was hard to say. In the world of Danmachi, Riesel had never heard of anyone achieving an exploit through self-training and leveling up as a result. The original work also never mentioned anyone leveling up by means other than defeating powerful monsters or undertaking formidable adventures. But in a situation without the dungeon and monsters to hunt, Riesel could only persist in training this way. This kind of training continued for a full 3 days. During these 3 days, aside from eating, drinking, bathing, sleeping, and taking care of personal needs, Riesel spent most of the time practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard pavilion. Many people in the mansion noticed this scene, and through word of mouth, for some reason, news of him switching to swordsmanship spread. With Yuri intentionally spreading the news, many people already knew that Riesel's gate was damaged and could no longer use magic, rendering him unable to be a magician in the future. Considering this, his shift to swordsmanship did not seem too abrupt. Moreover, as time passed, people began to treat it as a scenic view of the Frenzel residence. Many servants and even bodyguards secretly watched Riesel practice swordsmanship, gossiping about it and creating quite a bit of discussion. However, with the spread of this news, some troublesome individuals, in the end, still came knocking at the door. On this day, after finishing his usual swordsmanship practice, Riesel was just about to go back for a good bath when he was informed of something by the servant. "Someone is looking for me." Upon hearing the servant's words, Riesel was quite surprised. "Yes." The servant stood in place meticulously, speaking respectfully to him. "The visitor claims to be a servant of your friend, stating that they have a letter they would like to deliver to you." With that, the servant handed a letter to him. Taking it, Riesel furrowed his brows slightly, but still opened the letter and began reading its contents. After a while, his tightly furrowed brows remained unchanged. This letter was indeed from his so-called friend, more accurately, it should be said to be from the friend of the original Riesel. He was well regarded by many due to his naturally abundant magical energy, which attracted the attention of numerous noble children to his side. And this letter was sent precisely by one of these noble children. His name was Archie Rhine, the second son of the Rhine family, a count family in Genas. Among the group of noble children gathered around the original Riesel, most were from Viscount and Baron families, with only 2 being from the Count family. These 2, being of major noble status, held higher positions and identities than the rest, thus leading the group. Archie Rhine was one of these leaders, and he was particularly fond of taking charge. Initially, when the original Riesel first entered Spriller Academy and gained some reputation, Archie approached him, showing concern and care, and soon after, brought him into this small group of noble children. Whenever the original Riesel went out fooling around, it was Archie who took the lead, almost always the one to invite him. In other words, the decline and loss of motivation of the original Riesel could be attributed to Archie, accounting for at least half of the reasons. Archie was the typical bad influence. If parents knew about him, they would certainly advise their children with solemn warnings not to be friends with such a bad influence. Now, somehow, he got wind of Riesel's relationship with the Frenzel family and sent him a letter through his servant. While the letter contained a lot of irrelevant pleasantries and greetings, the main purpose seemed to be just one. That was, he wanted Riesel to hang out and meet with everyone. The so-called everyone undoubtedly referred to those noble children who used to fool around with the original Riesel. So be it. After recalling memories of those noble children, Riesel let go of the letter in his hand. Let's go meet them. With a calm tone, he let the letter fall, blown away by the wind. Only then did he turn and leave, returning to the mansion. Frenzel Mansion, top floor office. You want to go out? Yuri, who was busy with some paperwork and sat at her desk, was surprised to hear Riesel's request. Yet. Riesel nodded. An old friend invited me out for a meeting. Is that okay? Yuri expressed hesitancy. Don't forget, you're likely still being watched by the heretic assassin. But as I said before, I can't hide forever. I have to move on. Riesel smiled slightly. Regardless, I can't just stand still and need to do something, no. Although he accepted her proposition and temporarily stayed on her side, it didn't mean he wanted to rely solely on her protection. He also wanted to turn from being passive to taking the initiative, wanting to know how strong the enemies he faced really were. Facing a terrorist organization at the national level, he might indeed be in over his head. But avoiding them for the rest of his life was not his intent. This was also an opportunity for him. He wanted to go out, explore, and test the reactions of various parties. Whether it was the original Riesel's acquaintances or the assassin who attacked him, without probing and understanding, how could he plan for the future? If he were to be attacked again, Riesel could use it as a chance to verify his power in this world. Now that he had reached level 5, he wanted to see where he stood. Yuri was unaware of his train of thought, but she could somewhat guess that he wanted to test the reactions of those who were secretly observing him. She didn't know his current power, and her perspective naturally leaned toward considering it dangerous. However, Riesel's approach couldn't be entirely dismissed. Going out like this could at least test whether the heretic assassin had abandoned pursuit due to the news of damage to his gate. After pondering, Yuri had an idea. How about this? Yuri stared at his eyes. I'll assign 2 bodyguards to you. How does that sound? Bodyguards. Riesel frowned. You can't go out alone, can you? Yuri replied irritably. What if you run into danger? Without someone to protect you, do you think you can survive? I believe I can. Riesel replied inwardly and couldn't voice it aloud. He hadn't figured out how to explain to her that he was different now, no longer defenseless and powerless. Therefore, even though he understood her stance and reason, he was still quite conflicted. On the other hand, Yuri was extremely decisive at this moment. That's decided then. Yuri turned to Marilyn. Marilyn, bring Anne and Ian over. Marilyn nodded and quickly left the office. It didn't take long for her to return, bringing 2 people with her. They were 2 knights. Moreover, they were 2 beautiful female knights with striking and classy appearances. Let me introduce them. Yuri smiled slightly, introducing the 2 female knights. These 2 are my attendants, Anne and Ian, bound by a contract with me. Chapter 89, First Friend. Contract. It was a power that only magicians could wield. Because magicians often required chance and time to prepare when casting magic, contracts were born out of necessity. Initially, the purpose of contracts was to allow magicians to enlist bodyguards under certain conditions, ensuring protection during the preparation of magic and defending against enemies. However, as time passed and history unfolded, contracts evolved into various forms, used in different aspects of life such as restraints, agreements, or even enslavement of others. Rules established through contracts had to be executed once activated, or else they triggered a punishment mechanism. For instance, slaves deprived of their human rights were usually bound by a slavery contract facilitated by a magician. Once the contract was successful, the slave had to unquestionably obey the master's commands or face consequences ranging from torture to loss of life. The original Riesel's grandfather was a slave to a rural merchant, obedient to his master's every command. Upon discovering the original Riesel's innate and powerful magical energy, the grandfather didn't hesitate to offer his own grandchild to his master. Fortunately, the original Riesel managed to escape. Otherwise, the ignorant rural merchant would have exploited his talents, potentially subjecting him to a slavery contract, a lifetime of enslavement. In comparison to the rights-depriving slavery contract, the attendant contract was much more fair. When a magician needed a bodyguard for protection, they often proposed the establishment of an attendant contract. Unlike the domineering and rights-ignoring nature of the slavery contract, the attendant contract emphasized equality. The magician proposing the contract had to agree to fulfill the wish of the prospective attendant for the contract to be in effect. Under this contract, the magician had to wholeheartedly strive to fulfill the attendant's wish, otherwise, the contract became void. On the other hand, if the magician successfully fulfilled the attendant's wish, the contract became effective, and the attendant had to protect their master with all their might, or face the consequences outlined in the contract. Hence, the attendant contract was the most commonly used means for magicians to enlist bodyguards. Many influential magicians, especially nobles who lacked neither wealth nor status, often possessed the ability to fulfill numerous wishes, attracting a multitude of attendants to ensure their safety. As a marquis, a chief court magician, and a strategic class magician, Yuri naturally commands numerous attendants, each possessing considerable power. Marilyn was Yuri's first attendant, having served her for a long time and earning her trust. The two female knights brought by Marilyn were also attendants who had formed contracts with Yuri. Riesel glanced at the two newcomers for a moment. Whether it was Anne or Ian, both seemed to be in their early 20s and considered to be in the prime of their youth. Among them, Anne appeared slightly older, with a mature appearance and sharp, resolute eyes. She sported a side ponytail of purple hair cascading over her shoulders, and at her waist hung a long sword, giving off a reliable aura. Ian looked younger than Anne but older than Riesel, Yuri, and Marilyn. Although not as mature as Anne, her figure was graceful. Wearing a serious expression, her deep blue hair was braided into a twist hanging in front, giving off an equally reliable vibe. The two wielded different weapons. Anne wielded a long sword resembling a great sword but not as large, while Ian brandished a slender sword resembling a rapier, both classy and appealing. At first glance, they exuded a sense of reliability. "My lady." The two female knights, wearing less armor, bow their heads respectfully to Yuri, showing great respect. "Anne, Ian." Yuri nods to the two attendants. "I have a task for you." The two female knights step forward simultaneously. "Please command." Anne lowers her head, awaiting orders. "As long as my lady wishes." Ian speaks earnestly. "Do you recognize this person?" Yuri points at Riesel. "I need you to protect him outside and safely bring him back." Upon hearing this, Anne and Ian both turned their gaze to Riesel. Riesel nodded in response. The two female knights exchanged glances and then turned their attention back to Yuri. "Yes." Without asking for reasons or expressing objections, the two women readily accept the task. Yuri looked back at Riesel. "Anne and Ian became my attendants a long time ago. Their strength is outstanding, ranking among the top 5 of all my attendants. With them protecting you, your journey should be much safer." "All right, I will bring them along." Riesel could only accept her arrangement. "That's good." Yuri first smiled, then became serious. "Be careful with everything. If you encounter any difficult dangers, immediately retreat and don't act recklessly." "Understand." Her advice may sound a bit excessive but conveyed a clear sense of concern. "Don't worry." Riesel lightly smiled. "I know my limits." After saying that, he left Yuri's office. "Go." Yuri urged Anne and Ian with a nod, and the two of them bowed their heads before following Riesel. Once the footsteps of the three gradually faded away, Marilyn finally spoke up. "Is this really okay, my lady?" Marilyn asked in a low voice. With Anne and Ian on his side, his safety should be guaranteed. Yuri didn't look at Marilyn, still gazing in the direction of the door. "He's right. We can't keep him locked up here forever. He's truly a fearless man." Marilyn's tone sounded very impolite, it could even be said she spoke harshly. "I heard he used to be ignorant and incompetent, spending his time in drinking and pleasure, a country boy who was easily swayed by a group of young nobles. But looking at his current actions, it's hard to imagine he was someone like that before. At first, I was also surprised, you know." Yuri smirked. "I thought he was feigning calm, deliberately putting on an act or something. Now it seems that might be his true character." Yuri couldn't help but recall the scene when she first met Riesel. Back then, he was already lying in a pool of blood, barely alive. When she arrived and scared off the attackers, she saw a strong sense of vigilance and hostility in his eyes. Thinking about that look in his eyes, Yuri had to admit that the initial reason their relationship had developed to its current state was because of that particular moment. In those eyes, she seemed to see a wild beast imprisoned, a fierce tiger robbed of its freedom, venting anger to everything around it. It was at that moment that she felt a connection. As a result, she brought him back. As a result, she became interested in him, personally checking on his condition and gradually considering him an important friend. "Friend, hey?" Yuri mumbled, and a hint of coldness flickered in her eyes. "He's my first friend. I can't let the rats in the gutter harm him." At the same time, outside the gate of the mansion. "Thank you." Riesel looked at Anne and Ian, who walked behind him and expressed his gratitude to them. "No need," Anne said calmly without changing her expression. "This is the lady's order, and we are just following her order." "Yes." Ian also spoke with a rigid tone. "As long as it's the lady's command, we will do our best to fulfill it, no matter what it is." "Even so, I still want to thank you," Riesel said calmly. "This time going out, there may be some dangers coming our way. If we really encounter something unexpected, you don't need to worry about me." Leaving those words behind, he did not give the two female knights a chance to respond and turned away. "What does he mean?" Ian frowned. Anne remained silent, only watching his back with a meaningful gaze. Though they each had their own thoughts, they didn't hesitate to follow in his footsteps. Even though they didn't understand the meaning behind his words, what they had to do would not change. Genas's royal capital was a grand city called Yelovaya. The city was bustling, with most buildings resembling large chalk-white buildings. At first glance, it appeared majestic, giving one a sense of entering a medieval magical kingdom. The residents of Yelovaya were predominantly wealthy, giving the city a more glamorous appearance compared to other urban areas. Being the capital of the kingdom, anyone residing here had to possess some capital of their own. Naturally, the city overflowed with various nobles. Due to the location of the royal palace, nobles frequently came and went. Some served the king as court nobles within the palace, while others owned territories outside the city. Even honorary and local nobles could be found here, creating a diverse mix of people. In this location, Riesel, who had left the Frenzel residence, found himself in a plaza of Yelovaya. In front of a fountain in the plaza, a group of noble children had gathered. "Riesel! Over here!" Someone called out to Riesel. Riesel, busy observing the surroundings, immediately lifted his gaze and looked in the direction of the voice. He spotted the group of noble children from his memories. They were dressed in a refined manner, with carriages parked nearby and bodyguards standing by. He had to admit, the grandeur of their meeting was quite impressive. The one who called out to him was the leader of the group, Archie Rhine, who keenly noticed him and waved his hand. Chapter 90, Noble Children. Archie Rhine was a young man with a striking appearance. Even among a group of noble children dressed in dazzling attire, he managed to draw attention, becoming the center of discussions. At this moment, several females surrounded him, seemingly vying for the opportunity to converse with him. Envy and jealousy cast from nearby male companions. Riesel's arrival initially went unnoticed by the group. However, the most popular figure, Archie, was the first to notice him and warmly welcomed him. "My buddy, it's really good to see you again." Leaving the group, Archie strode toward Riesel, arms open as if to embrace him. However, before Riesel could react, two people stepped forward, namely Anne and Ian. The two female knights, who were silently following Riesel from behind, positioned themselves between Riesel and Archie, blocking his approach. Archie halted, staring at the two female knights in surprise. Others followed suit, and soon a murmur arose. Who are these two female knights? They look so beautiful. The outstanding looks of Anne and Ian caught the attention of the nobles, with many admiring their beauty. Anne and Ian, however, remained indifferent, focused on protecting Riesel. Their actions were unmistakably aimed at safeguarding him from unfamiliar and suspicious characters. As attendants, preventing unknown and potentially threatening figures from approaching their master was a mandatory skill. Since Yuri had entrusted them with Riesel's protection, they acted with the commitment expected of those safeguarding their master. Observing this scene, Riesel finally spoke up. "It's okay, you two can step back." Upon hearing his words, Anne and Ian silently retreated a step, returning to their positions behind him. Yet, their vigilant expressions persisted, eyes fixed on anyone approaching him, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. What was initially a lively atmosphere became somewhat awkward and tense due to Anne and Ian's unexpected actions. Bodyguards from all around subtly moved closer, especially Archie's bodyguard, hand on the hilt of their sword. Fortunately, at this tense moment, Riesel broke the silence. "I hope I wasn't too late." Stepping forward, Riesel spoke to Archie with a casual tone. "Of course not." Archie, finally grasping the situation, glanced briefly at Anne and Ian before returning his warm smile to Riesel. "We were delighted that you could come. It had been a month since we last saw you, you know." Just as he finished speaking, however, another voice chimed in. "Looks like you're doing well, Riesel." The speaker was a man with slightly dark skin and a robust body. Not as handsome as Archie, he exuded an athletic vibe, the type that seemed to enjoy running under the sun, a rugged and appealing man, likely to attract those who appreciate strong, muscular men. Approaching much like Archie, he glanced over Riesel from head to toe before breaking into a smile. "Your condition is better than I imagined. I thought you might be too scared to leave the house by now." Seemingly teasing but carrying a hint of underlying sarcasm, Riesel turned his gaze toward this robust man. Drawing from the memories of the original Riesel, he easily identified this man. Senna Lom, the third son of the Viscount Lom family, a year older than Riesel and a somewhat awkward acquaintance. Although the original Riesel might not have sensed any subtle animosity, Riesel, from the man's sly smiles, deduced that this man harbored some dislike for him. Undoubtedly, this had to do with the Lom family being a vassal to the Rhine family, which explained Senna's submissive attitude toward Archie. In essence, he was Archie's servant and likely developed a bit of resentment due to Archie's continuous friendly attitude toward Riesel. As Riesel was lost in thought, others took this opportunity to step forward. In total, 6 people approached. Among them, 4 were male, and 2 were female. The 4 males had distinctive looks, one tall, one short, one fat, and one skinny, forming a peculiar combination of tallness, shortness, fatness, and skinniness. Walking together, they created an irresistibly comical sight. Some were children of a Viscount family, and some were from a Baron family. As they approached, they immediately gathered around Senna, giving off an aura of reverence toward Archie. As for the 2 females, one was a girl with striking red hair that immediately caught Riesel's eye, while the other was a young girl with a curious expression, glancing around in all directions. The 2 formed a vivid contrast, prompting him to take a closer look. These 4 males and 2 females, along with Archie and Senna, totaled 8 people, the noble children who had been mingling with the original Riesel. Seeing everyone gathered, Riesel's eyes subtly flickered, hinting at thoughts unknown, though his face remained calm. "Apologies for the wait. I didn't expect you all to arrive so early," Riesel said with a calm tone. Upon hearing that, Archie was the first to smile. "Hey buddy, we were just dying to know how you're doing," Archie said, arms open but holding back from a hug this time. "Heard you got attacked and took some serious injuries? Man, we were freaking out, you know. Hope you're all right." "Yeah." Senna maintained his mysterious half-smile. "If we had known you'd come out unscathed and even formed a relationship with the Frenzel family, we wouldn't have worried at all." His words caused the gazes of the noble children present to subtly flicker. The red-haired girl and the curious-looking girl even cast a glance at Anne and Ian standing behind Riesel, their thoughts unclear. In contrast, Riesel paid no attention to Archie's words or Senna's theatrics. He merely glanced meaningfully at Archie before speaking up. "This time, I really hit a jackpot. Encountering Yuri, such a kind and life-saving benefactor, Riesel did feel that his luck was not bad at all. Of course, to those present, his words carried a different meaning. In their ears, his remark likely referred to his relationship with the Frenzel family. Being acquainted with the famous, talented, and beautiful young lady of the Frenzel family, who was a strategic class magician and national treasure at such a young age, was bound to make countless noble children jealous. This young lady, similar in age to Riesel, was already the head of the family. One must know that the Frenzel family was a marquis family, second only to a duke. Many, including the fathers of these noble children present, would be eager to establish connections with this young lady, known for both beauty and strength. Yet, this exceptional and talented young lady chose to take in Riesel. As that fact crossed the minds of some noble children present, their hearts filled with jealousy, except for Archie, who still showed genuine warmth toward Riesel. Anyway, as long as you're okay. Archie patted Riesel's shoulder. Today, it's on me. Let's celebrate your smooth recovery. Celebrate? Riesel paused for a moment, then said with a hint of strangeness in his voice. Where are we celebrating? Do I even need to say? Senna took over the topic, revealing a smile understood only by men. Of course, we're going to a place that will make everyone happy. His words brought forth meaningful smiles from the four tall, short, fat, and skinny youths. Seeing this, Riesel knew exactly what these guys were up to. Even Marilyn knew that Riesel used to spend time with these guys, indulging in drinking and pleasure. With the memories of the original Riesel, he was well aware of their nature. Forget it. Riesel immediately shook his head. If that's the case, you guys go ahead. I'm not going. Why? Senna asked with a surprised face. Aren't you the best at this kind of thing? To be honest, hearing someone evaluate him like that left Riesel genuinely somewhat stupefied. You guys better not involve me. I don't want to be kicked out. Riesel said flatly. With that answer, everyone fell silent and quickly understood. You're right. Archie smiled wryly. If I were you, I wouldn't dare to mess around either. Meh. It's different when you need to climb up to a thigh of big shots, hey. Senna remarked sourly. At this point, the red-haired girl, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. Humph, it's because your thoughts are too gross. The red-haired girl snorted coldly, wearing a disdainful expression. Do you forget we girls are here too? You really want to drag us along to that place? The curious-looking girl who had been observing everything joined the red-haired girl in casting a disdainful glance at the male group. Hey, don't take it seriously, okay? Archie's wry smile deepened. How could we really go? It's just a casual joke, okay? That's right. Senna and the four tall, short, fat, and skinny youths immediately nodded repeatedly in agreement. All right, let's head to the market then. I heard there's a bunch of new stuff lately. It's been a while since I went. Let's go and check it out. Archie suggested. That sounds about right. The red-haired girl finally expressed satisfaction. Chapter 91, Royal Market. Archie's mention of the market wasn't about the ordinary day-to-day market where one could buy groceries, meat, and various daily necessities, the kind of market anyone could stroll into. In Yelovaya, such places did exist, but what he referred to was a place accessible only to nobles and wealthy merchants. Its purpose was not significantly different from a regular market, but the items sold were entirely different. In that exclusive market, various magic items, magic weapons, magic books, swordsmanship books, and even slaves were on sale. During their leisure time, many nobles and wealthy merchants enjoyed browsing this market, looking for valuable purchases. Some idle noble children also liked to pass their time at this place. Especially females, who naturally enjoyed shopping, were particularly fond of such places. Hence, the two noble girls found Archie's suggestion satisfactory, while the other noble boys raised no objections. Of course, Riesel knew that this was also a result of everyone present giving face to the red-haired girl. As mentioned earlier, in this small group, everyone else was from minor noble families, such as viscounts and barons. Only two people were from the count families, which were the major nobles. Archie Rhine was one of them, and the other was precisely the red-haired girl, Carrera Elliot. Like the Rhine family, the Elliot family was also a count family. Carrera was the eldest daughter of this family, 19 years old, the same age as Archie, making her one of the older members of this small group. Though Archie held a leading position in the group that was almost unshakable, he couldn't ignore Carrera's opinion. When she was present, he often entertained her, going to places she liked. Honestly, Riesel was a bit puzzled about why a rich young lady would join this group and spend her days seeking thrills like a delinquent. Especially Carrera. According to the original Riesel's memories, she seemed to have joined this small group voluntarily, unlike the others who were either brought in by Archie or intentionally joined for connections with the Rhine family. There was also a somewhat immature and curious-looking girl who joined the group with Carrera. Her name was Sylvanie Roxy, 15 years old, undoubtedly the youngest within the group. She followed Carrera like her shadow, believing that without Carrera, she wouldn't have joined this group on her own. Carrera's motives were known to none except Archie, who had some understanding. The original Riesel was equally clueless, never even contemplating the issue at all. However, the original Riesel was initially willing to join this small group not only due to Archie's influence but also Carrera's influence. If one were to ask why? Does this world's Riesel actually like Carrera? In a luxurious carriage, as Riesel muttered and recalled various aspects of the group's dynamics, he suddenly discovered something somewhat shocking. What? Ian overheard his inadvertently mutter words, unable to hear clearly, and thus showed a bit of curiosity. Anne, on the side, also cast a glance in his direction. It's nothing, don't mind it. Riesel remembered that Anne and Ian were both in the carriage, protecting him nearby. As a result, he shook his head and brushed it off. Though Ian furrowed her brows, slightly dissatisfied with his dismissive attitude, she didn't mind adding a few more words since she had already spoken. Forgive my frankness, Mr. Riesel. Ian stared seriously at him. But this second son of the Rhine family seems a bit untrustworthy. I don't recommend getting too close to him. Oh? On what basis? Riesel's attention shifted as Ian spoke, immediately turning to her. In his eyes, there's harbored ambition. It was Anne who answered him, not Ian, but this answer made him smirk. Ambition, hey? That's one way to put it. Riesel muttered to himself. If it weren't for ambition, why would a son of a count family pull in a countryside boy like Riesel into his group full of noble children? The group comprised 9 individuals, 8 of whom were nobles, leaving Riesel as the sole commoner, signifying something suspicious. It meant that before Riesel joined, Archie and the rest weren't willing to accept any commoners into their group. If that was the case, why was Riesel an exception? Because he had value to exploit. Someone with the potential to become a tactical class magician and even a strategic class magician was someone anyone would want to recruit. Yet, as Riesel recalled, he discovered an interesting fact. Apart from Archie, no one in the entire Spriller Academy had shown closeness or goodwill toward the original Riesel. This was not normal, and he refused to believe that no one had ulterior motives if they knew his potential. Those people, most likely stopped by Archie, right? Archie seemed intent on keeping the potential of Riesel under wraps. With a group of children from other noble families gathering around Archie, it seemed to Riesel that Archie was tirelessly recruiting these noble children to build his own circle of influence. Why was Senna subtly at odds with Riesel? Simply because he thought Archie valued Riesel more than him, recognizing Riesel's future potential, and felt jealous as a result? Carrera joining this group with Sylvanie was probably a result of Archie's careful manipulation too. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so friendly toward her, clearly intending to build a good relationship. Everything was carefully planned. Does that guy really think I'd believe his nonsense, thinking he's been worried about me? Riesel chuckled inwardly. If Archie was truly concerned about him, why was there complete silence from Archie when he was recuperating? Yuri had sent someone to Spriller Academy to request leave on his behalf, so Archie should have known his condition. If Archie were genuinely worried, Yuri's representative would have brought back some information, such as Archie searching for him or something similar. Unfortunately, there was nothing. Furthermore, since his gait was damaged and he could no longer continue as a magician, Yuri discreetly leaked this information long before he recovered from his injuries, hoping to evade further assassination attempts. With all these reasons, Archie should have known about his poor condition long ago but chose to remain silent, or perhaps he didn't even care in the first place. Riesel found this intriguing. He understood that Archie indeed knew about his condition, and precisely because of that, Archie decided to abandon and ignore him, as he had become a waste with no further use. Yet, why did Archie knock now, not earlier or later, but precisely after news spread about him turning to swordsmanship and being taken in by the Frenzel family? Senna's remarks earlier were also full of bitterness, clearly envious of his growing relationship with the Frenzel family. Was there really no special reason behind their behavior? Anne and Ian, These two competent attendants also noticed some clues behind Archie's group behavior and decided to warn him. After all, if he handled this poorly, it might affect Yuri, who was their master. Finished pondering, Riesel turned to Anne and Ian. Do you two know anything about him? The two female knights exchanged glances, and after a moment, Ian spoke up. Rumors are telling that Count Rhine is preparing to appoint his heir soon. I see. After hearing that information, Riesel understood something, and soon, his expression returned to calm. Let me see then. What you actually want to do, Archie. Yelovaya, Royal Market. This exclusive upscale market, open only to nobles and wealthy merchants, was situated in the city center near the palace. Carriages escorted by bodyguards made their way to this place, stopping at the entrance of the market. Extraordinarily dressed individuals disembarked from the carriages and only then did the carriages proceed to the adjacent open space for parking. Riesel and the others, following Archie's lead, entered the royal market. At the market's entrance, stationed personnel scrutinized the identities of those entering, allowing only nobles and wealthy merchants through. Ordinary residents, and even their bodyguards, were halted and denied entry. With Archie and others present, Riesel was naturally allowed to enter, but Anne and Ian were stopped. However, when they showed a token engraved with a snowflake pattern to the personnel at the gate, they were immediately allowed through. This scene caught the attention of many, causing Archie and the others to look at each other in blank dismay, their eyes flickering, wondering what was going on in their minds. After a while, the group entered the royal market and stopped at the plaza near the entrance. Do any of you have something specific you want to buy? Archie asked, holding a parchment listing various items provided upon entry. Some items on the list were marked, indicating their rarity or recent arrival, capturing the interest of many. I want to check out the slave district. Senna raised his hand, having just been eyeing a batch of newly arrived and exceptionally beautiful female slaves. We want to go too. The four tall, short, fat, and skinny youths also exclaimed simultaneously, all sharing Senna's interest. Observing the directions many male nobles and wealthy male merchants were heading, it became apparent that they too were heading toward the slave district. Only Carrera and Sylvanie furrowed their brows slightly upon hearing the slave district. I want to buy a magic item. Carrera declared. I want to check out the new jewelry. Sylvanie added, expressing a different preference. Okay, what about you, Riesel? Archie, seemingly anticipating this situation, turned to Riesel for his input. I'm open to anything. Riesel replied nonchalantly. Although, if possible, I'd like to see what swordsmanship they have here. Upon hearing his words, everyone reacted with intrigue. You're not seriously considering switching to swordsmanship, are you? Senna asked while observing Riesel with a subtle sense of amusement. Chapter 92, Like a Different Person. Riesel certainly knew why Senna took pleasure in his misfortune. Because, in the eyes of the general public, the status of a magician was undoubtedly higher than that of a swordsman. This was not only because those qualified to become magicians were rare, but also due to the national situation. For the sake of war, for combat power, countries needed tactical class magicians and strategic class magicians as military weapons. Therefore, whether in any country, the training and emphasis on magicians far surpassed that of swordsmen. This could be observed from the existence of national magic schools like Spriller Academy in this world. Schools specialized in training magicians were present in all major countries, but there was not a single one exclusively for training swordsmen. Therefore, in the eyes of the world, magicians were considered noble, a symbol of status. Simply becoming a tactical class magician or a strategic class magician could easily grant one a title, turning them into a noble. Such national policies made countless people dream of becoming magicians, and that was self-evident. Even for those with insufficient innate magical energy, lacking natural talent, and unable to learn and use tactical class or strategic class magic, being a magician specializing in combat class magic alone could still accomplish many things. For example, as mentioned earlier, the slavery contract could only be cast by a magician. If a slave trader wanted to engage in this type of business, they would undoubtedly have to pay a hefty sum to hire a magician. This applied to various aspects, such as writing magic spells into magic crystals to create various magic items, collaborating with blacksmiths to manufacture magic weapons, and other tasks that required magicians. Tasks such as crafting potions with unique effects, designing magic defense systems, and undertaking special construction projects were impossible without magicians. Thanks to this, magicians with even just combat class magic were sought after by various factions. Mastery in combat class magic alone could ensure formidable combat power. Magicians were respected and adored wherever they went. In contrast, swordsmen, relying on swordsmanship, might become stronger than most magicians in combat. However, apart from combat, they could hardly do anything else. Therefore, a magician switching to swordsmanship and becoming a swordsman was seen by most people as a self-demotion from a noble upper-class individual to an ordinary individual. Unless truly unavoidable circumstances arose that forced them to change, no magician would willingly transition to becoming a swordsman. If Riesel chose to study swordsmanship, he would basically be giving up the path to becoming a noble and a rare prodigy. Unless he achieved great feats or became an unbeatable figure like a sword saint, gaining recognition and nobility as a swordsman would be extremely challenging. If Riesel came from a noble background, there might be a chance to inherit the family and become a noble. However, being a commoner, and even a rural one, after studying swordsmanship, expecting the same admiration and acclaim as before would be impossible. Senna precisely took pleasure in this, feeling a sense of schadenfreude. T/N, schadenfreude is the experience of pleasure, joy, or self-satisfaction that comes from learning of or witnessing the troubles, failures, pain, or humiliation of another. But still better than continuing to be a failure, right? Riesel's expression remained calm as he glanced at Senna. Moreover, with my magical energy, after switching to swordsmanship, my combat strength should not decrease but might even increase. Dealing with a few student-level magicians should not be too difficult. Hearing that, Senna's complexion immediately stiffened. The rest of the group were also startled by his words, falling into silence. That. Ah ha ha ha. Archie, who sensed trouble, quickly laughed awkwardly, preparing to defuse the situation. However, before he could do so, Riesel had already changed the topic. Since everyone wants to see different things, let's split up for now. Riesel suggested. Let's meet back here in an hour, all right? While saying this, he glanced at everyone in the group. Okay. Let's do that. I have no objections. Me neither. Under Riesel's influence, the 4 tall, short, fat, and skinny youths in the group unconsciously responded. This time, Archie's complexion slightly stiffened. All right then. Riesel, without further ado, left, while Anne and Ian followed suit, mimicking his steps. The onlookers couldn't help but cast envious glances at him, impressed by the outstanding appearance of the 2 women following him. Shortly after, Carrera and Sylvanie also left. Only Archie and the other 5 remained, standing in place, momentarily losing all reaction. After a while, Senna was the first to express anger. Damn it! Senna muttered through gritted teeth. That country boy really thinks he can boss us around? Who does he think he is? Archie remained silent, his expression not looking too good. The 4 tall, short, fat, and skinny youths dared not even make a sound, timidly standing in place. Why did they respond so obediently to Riesel's orders just now? Were they tired of living? If Archie pursued this matter, they would be in trouble. Fortunately, Archie, though displeased, did not vent his anger on them. Rather than being angry, he felt more puzzled. Why does it feel like he's changed somehow? Archie doubted. Was he the type to give orders to others before? He felt that the current Riesel's demeanor seemed unfamiliar, like a different person. Senna, however, didn't find anything strange. What's so odd about it? Senna coldly snorted. He's climbed up with the Frenzel family. Maybe he thinks he's made it and looks down on us low-ranking nobles, that's why he's acting so arrogant now. Upon hearing the Frenzel family, Archie's eyes flickered, but Senna's words were clearly not finished yet. Hey Archie, why do we still need to invite that country boy out? Senna asked, visibly upset. He can't even become a magician anymore, and we're going to be from 2 different worlds from now on. The academy is even discussing whether to cancel his enrollment and expel him. You said before that he became worthless, and we shouldn't bother with him anymore. So why suddenly invite him out again? You don't understand. Archie said expressionlessly. He, as a person, may have lost his value. But he struck luck and formed a connection with the Frenzel family. This relationship, if left unused, would be a waste, no. You're right. Senna licked the corners of his lips. If we can get to know Marquis Frenzel through that country boy, then we'll have a powerful backing. Upon hearing that, Archie also smiled, but it was a cold smile. If Marquis Frenzel can put in a good word for me, my father will surely stop considering my useless elder brother as the heir, right? Archie clenched his fists and became more determined. That was his goal. His family was on the verge of appointing its new head soon. The next Count Rhine and head of the Rhine family were about to become known throughout the royal capital. But a problem lay here. In this world, titles and family head positions could be inherited by descendants, but in most cases, it was the eldest son who took over as the heir. Of course, this wasn't absolute. If the eldest son was incompetent, some sensible nobles would consider a child with better abilities as the heir. However, such people were the minority. Most nobles, when choosing an heir, tended to favor the eldest son. Archie's father, the current head of the Rhine family, had been one such person. Archie could be sure that, compared to himself, his father would have preferred to choose his elder brother as the heir. This made him very unwilling. In terms of ability, he believed he was not inferior to his elder brother, and in many aspects, he even surpassed his elder brother by far. In terms of connections, although he seemed to be fooling around outside, he had also built a considerable network. On the other hand, his elder brother had mediocre magical energy and couldn't even become a magician. His elder brother's swordsmanship had been disappointing as well, since he couldn't even defeat a bodyguard. In every aspect, his elder brother had been mediocre and incomparable to him. Yet, his father still believed that the eldest son should be the heir. Why? Just because that damn brother of his had been born 1 or 2 years earlier. He refused to accept that bullshit. As long as I can establish a connection with the Frenzel family, my father should choose me as the heir even if he's reluctant, right? After all, that woman was a prominent figure in the kingdom, one of the continent's only 8 strategic class magicians, possessing the power to determine the future of the entire country. Being able to form a connection with such an existence was a great fortune for the Rhine family. For the sake of the entire family, his father, as the head, would undoubtedly choose him as the heir, striving to maintain this relationship. Let's go and do our own things for now, Archie said to the rest of the group. When the opportunity comes, let Riesel introduce us to Marquis Frenzel. Yes. Senna and the other 4 immediately nodded. On the other side, Riesel had long since forgotten about Archie and the others. Following the directions on the sign, he arrived at a store specializing in selling swordsmanship books. Welcome. The store owner immediately stepped forward personally and greeted Riesel. Excuse me, are you looking for swordsmanship? He glanced rather impressively at Anne and Ian, then turned to Riesel, who clearly held the leading position. Yeah. Riesel glanced around and asked. What kind of swordsmanship do you have here? We have many swordsmanships, a total of 1,137, including 840 elementary swordsmanship and 297 advanced swordsmanship. The store owner respectfully explained. Most of these swordsmanship come from various territories within Genas, with a few originating from other countries. Which one would you like, sir? I don't care about their origin. Riesel glanced at the store owner. I just want to see some special swordsmanship. Got any? Upon hearing that, the store owner first paused, then shortly afterward, made a bitter smile. Sir, please don't joke around. The store owner flashed a wry smile. Special swordsmanship usually appears at auctions. How could it possibly be found in a store like mine? Although Riesel understood what the store owner meant, he couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed upon hearing that. Chapter 93, The Most Famous Swordsmanship. In a world devoid of dungeons to explore, Riesel felt the need to grow rapidly, and practicing swordsmanship became a necessary task for him. Otherwise, if he wanted quick growth, he would have to enter the battlefield to have numerous enemies to confront. This made him realize that perhaps, in the future when he travels to other worlds, he might encounter similar situations. Not every world was like Danmachi, where there were plenty of monsters posing a threat to humanity that he could confront. If in the future, he traveled to more peaceful worlds without enough enemies to confront, his growth would stagnate. This was something that must be avoided. Therefore, he felt that his immediate priority was to find swordsmanship to practice, ensuring that his growth would not come to a standstill. As long as there was swordsmanship to practice, he wouldn't have to worry about his growth stagnating, no matter which world he traveled to in the future. Among the many swordsmanships, the unquestionably fastest growing one after practice was special swordsmanship. Therefore, he decided to find a special swordsmanship to practice. Originally, The Holy Dragon sword style completely met his requirements, but unfortunately, this swordsmanship lacked the crucial breathing style. While he intended to persist in practicing the existing part first, for his future growth, he still needed to find a complete special swordsmanship to practice. In this situation, he was thinking that maybe he could find a special swordsmanship to practice in the royal market. But the reality proved that even in this upper-class society market open only to nobles and wealthy merchants, it was still challenging to find special swordsmanship. An auction? Hey! Riesel pondered for a moment before asking the store owner. When is the next auction? In the royal market, auctions were held every once in a while, and many people knew about it. The auction was organized by the supporters behind the royal market, and the items appearing in the auction were generally precious things not found in the market. Sometimes, even rare treasures would appear, attracting the competition of various nobles. It was said that during the auction, even dukes and members of the royal family might attend. Since the store owner mentioned that special swordsmanship would only appear in auctions, Riesel naturally wanted to take a look. But not every auction will have special swordsmanship. Anne was as sudden as ever, speaking without any warning. Is that so? Riesel was momentarily stunned. Yes. Ian nodded seriously. There aren't many special swordsmanship on sale to begin with. Royal families and major nobles of various countries hold most of them. Some particularly powerful special swordsmanships are even considered important legacies by them, such as the War King sword style of Genus's royal family. The War King sword style was the legacy swordsmanship of Genus's royal family, allowing the practitioner to evoke spiritual power and use it against their enemies. The power of this swordsmanship was formidable, much more potent than ordinary special swordsmanship. As a result, Genus's royal family considered it a legacy, proving the uniqueness of this swordsmanship as it has been passed down through generations. Special swordsmanship like this, highly valued by royal families and major nobles of various countries, was usually more powerful than ordinary special swordsmanship. However, this did not imply that other special swordsmanship was unremarkable. Generally, even minor nobles could not possess special swordsmanship. Only royal families and major nobles had the possession of special swordsmanship, they even possessed multiple special swordsmanship as backup. After all, swordsmanship sometimes demanded compatibility, and not everyone was suitable for its practice. The Holy Dragon sword style was a prime example. Not only was it extremely challenging to learn, but it also required a naturally large amount of magical energy within one's body. The conditions were strict, and even if someone wished to pass it down as a legacy, finding a suitable practitioner from their descendants was not guaranteed. The same applied to special swordsmanship inherited by royal families and major nobles in various countries. It might not be suitable for all descendants to practice. At this point, having additional special swordsmanship available for practice within the family became crucial. Without it, many descendants who didn't meet the conditions for inheriting the swordsmanship might be left with no choice but to practice advanced swordsmanship, struggling to achieve success throughout their lives. For this reason, royal families and major nobles in various countries had a habit of collecting special swordsmanship as much as possible. Whenever new special swordsmanship emerged, they competed to obtain it, intending to leave it for suitable descendants. As a result, special swordsmanship was essentially monopolized by royal families and major nobles. The few instances of special swordsmanship that ended up outside were extremely rare, and people with special swordsmanship were reluctant to sell them easily as they were considered precious. If you want to acquire special swordsmanship at the auction, it might truly depend on luck, sir. Perhaps someone outside has luckily obtained a special swordsmanship but, due to a lack of money or personal need, decided to auction it here. Or maybe some noble family has fallen on hard times and has to auction off the special swordsmanship in their collection to survive. The store owner explained to Riesel several possibilities. Such situations are not so common, though. So, even in the royal market's auction, it's not guaranteed that special swordsmanship will be auctioned. Sometimes, it might not appear for a decade or even several decades. In other words, Riesel's plan to obtain special swordsmanship from the auction has also hit a dead end. Ha, this is getting troublesome. Riesel rubbed his forehead tiredly, while Anne and Ian, standing behind him, fell into silence. However, just when he was at a loss, the store owner seemed to think of something and hesitated. Actually, I do have a somewhat damaged special swordsmanship. Would you like to take a look, sir? The store owner made a surprising offer. Damaged special swordsmanship. Riesel became more attentive. Bring it here, I'd like to see it. The store owner acknowledged and quickly ran inside the store. Shortly afterward, he returned with a book. This one. The store owner handed the book to Riesel. Riesel took it and glanced at the title on the cover, but the moment he read the title, his eyes widened. Clearly and distinctly, the cover of this swordsmanship book displayed a name: Holy Dragon Sword Style. Yes, it was the very Holy Dragon Sword Style that he was familiar with. What the heck? Riesel was dumbfounded. On the other hand, perhaps intrigued, Anne and Ian leaned over for a look, both wearing expressions of sudden realization. I see, this is indeed that special swordsmanship. No wonder, the only special swordsmanship that would appear in the store is probably only this one. The two female knights remarked one after another. Do you know this swordsmanship? Riesel, regaining composure, looked at Anne and Ian. We do. Anne replied briefly. This is the special swordsmanship created by the Dragon Sword Saint, Ephiston Tussin-Lo, hailed as the strongest sword saint 400 years ago. Ian explained attentively. The reputation of this swordsmanship is extremely high. It's not an exaggeration to say it's the most famous swordsmanship on the continent. Unfortunately, upon hearing that explanation, Riesel was only getting confused. You don't know. Seeing his confusion, Ian was astonished and decided to continue her explanation. 400 years ago, the Holy Dragon Sword Style sparked a big conflict, resulting in the deaths of several sword saints. Numerous groups fought bitterly, creating deep-seated grudges that persist until today, leading to ongoing deadly conflicts. Seemingly a well-documented historical event, many people were aware of it. Riesel, however, remained oblivious, mainly because the original Riesel had no interest in history and hailed from a rural background, lacking broad knowledge. It was only now, after hearing Ian's explanation, that Riesel finally understood why the Holy Dragon Sword Style was the most famous swordsmanship on the continent. Firstly, it was obviously powerful. Secondly, the conflict it triggered 400 years ago had a profound impact on the world. Thanks to this, he also understood why the Holy Dragon Sword Style was incomplete, not because Yuri took away the breathing style from it and stored it separately, but because of the intense conflict 400 years ago. 400 years ago, after the death of the Dragon Sword Saint, the Holy Dragon Sword Style he created became the subject of intense conflict due to its overwhelming power, attracting many greedy individuals. The conflict was intense, involving not only various forces from across the continent but also numerous interventions from other sword saints. As a result, many lives were lost, leading to enmities among major forces. The Book of the Holy Dragon Sword Style also suffered destruction in this chaotic conflict, and its essential breathing style was destroyed, leaving only the swordsmanship itself. Ian shared what she knew. 400 years later, the swordsmanship fragment of the Holy Dragon Sword Style has become spread widely. It's not only present in Yelovia but is also collected by some people in larger cities. Coincidentally, Yuri's library possessed a fragment of this swordsmanship, which Riesel happened to come across. Clearly, he had previously misunderstood. This swordsmanship was not intentionally left for him to practice by Yuri but was merely a preserved fragment in her library. Many such fragments existed, even in this store. Yuri indeed contemplated whether he would be interested in learning swordsmanship, but she was not at the point of casually presenting him with a special swordsmanship for practice. The Frenzel family was once in decline and had only recently risen under the control of the lady. So, there is no legacy of special swordsmanship within the family. If Mr. Riesel wishes to practice special swordsmanship, it won't be as simple as it seems. Ian added. Upon hearing her words, Riesel's heart quickly sank to the bottom of the valley. It seemed that this matter of swordsmanship was indeed troublesome. Chapter 94, An Accidental Information. Customers, please take your time. Amidst the store owner's warm farewell, Riesel, accompanied by Anne and Ian, exited the store. In the end, he didn't purchase any swordsmanship books. Since he knew that special swordsmanship was probably out of his reach, he naturally wouldn't buy swordsmanship from this place. Although the store had quite a few advanced swordsmanship, with some being quite impressive, he felt that Yuri's library, with its dozen or so advanced swordsmanship, was the best choice. While the Frenzel family had recently risen and lacked a strong legacy, being a marquis family led by a strategic class magician, the advanced swordsmanship Yuri could collect wouldn't be too shabby. Therefore, if Riesel only wanted advanced swordsmanship, he was more inclined to choose from Yuri's library. Of course, he still had a lingering doubt. Is the breathing style of the Holy Dragon Sword Style really destroyed? Having experienced the uniqueness of the Holy Dragon sword style, Riesel was not eager to give up on this swordsmanship. As a result, with a bit of hope, he turned to Anne and Ian for confirmation. Unfortunately, their answers were cruel. "It's really gone, totally destroyed," Ian said with unwavering belief. According to the historical records, the book containing Holy Dragon sword style was obtained by a sword saint who was attacked by several other sword saints. Driven to desperation, this sword saint destroyed the book in despair. Although it was later pieced together, its most crucial breathing style could never be restored. This was also why the swordsmanship part of the Holy Dragon sword style spread so widely. It was the patched-up incomplete version, not treasured by many, and had been copied countless times over 4 centuries, ultimately spreading to every corner of the continent. As for the most important breathing style, it was truly lost. This is the fact confirmed by the theocracy's priests using the precognition system magic. Anne said with indifference, eliminating any lingering hope in Riesel's heart. Since even the priests using the precognition system had confirmed this fact, there might truly be no hope for the breathing style of the Holy Dragon sword style. Riesel, not one to be indecisive, accepted the reality. If something couldn't be done, he wouldn't dwell on it any longer. The other special swordsmanship was the same. Since they were difficult to obtain, he decided to choose advanced swordsmanship to practice first. "Let's go, we'll check out other stores." After making that decision, Riesel shook his head and focused entirely on choosing advanced swordsmanship. Anne and Ian naturally had no objections and followed behind him, browsing the stores in the royal market. For an hour, he continued to explore various stores, examining the advanced swordsmanship books. Yet, the result was still somewhat unsatisfactory. The swordsmanship available for sale in the market, even the advanced ones, didn't really stand out. While some were indeed excellent, they were only that excellent, not reaching the level of power that impressed him. "It seems like I'll have to stick to Yuri's library for now." Understanding it was futile to continue, Riesel stopped browsing the stores. Seeing that it was almost time, he walked back with Anne and Ian, returning to the entrance plaza of the royal market where everyone was supposed to gather. However, when he arrived, no one was there yet. After about 5 minutes, the 2 noble girls were the first to return. "We're back." Carrera held Sylvanie's hand, looking satisfied. She adorned her vibrant red hair with an exquisite hairpin, wore a beautiful necklace around her neck, and had a bracelet on her wrist that looked like a work of art. Her hands were full of shopping bags, clearly indicating a successful shopping spree. "Hee, delicious." Sylvanie also had added some accessories to her appearance, more on the cute side than Carrera's elegance. In addition to her numerous bags, she held something like an ice cream cone, licking it with each swipe, a look of bliss on her face. The 2 girls seemed to have had a great time shopping, and there was even a hint of lingering excitement in their eyes as if they hadn't had enough fun yet. "Where are Archie and the others?" Carrera, noticing that only Riesel had arrived, casually asked. "They haven't come yet." Riesel gave a simple reply, not saying much. Carrera's eyebrows slightly raised, and a somewhat uncertain expression appeared in her eyes as she looked at him. In fact, not only Archie but Carrera had also noticed the change in Riesel. As the only commoner in this small group, Riesel used to be a somewhat insecure guy, displaying a timid demeanor in front of the rest of the group. He would agree with whatever other people within the group said, only standing up for himself when in front of outsiders, giving off an air of being a noble and experiencing a sense of superiority. Additionally, Carrera observed that this future great magician, whom Archie had brought into their group, seemed to be in love with her when he first joined. He would occasionally steal glances at her, genuinely listen to what she said, even memorizing it all. Sometimes, he would even blatantly try to please her, and all of these actions were quite plain to see. He would also eagerly run over to help her carry her bags and packages and wore a happy expression if she gave him something. However, today's Riesel was entirely different from the past. From start to finish, he remained calm and indifferent, his gaze no longer dodging due to insecurity or timidity, daring even to give orders to the group. He was entirely changed compared to the past. Now, he completely ignored her, no longer trying to please her as before. His gaze, once infatuated, now treated her like an irrelevant stranger. Senna thought Riesel's boldness and arrogance were due to his connection with the Frenzel family, but Carrera didn't agree. For no apparent reason, Riesel's expression was too calm, too plain, and his demeanor reflected the same. There was no trace of the self-satisfied look he used to have when mingling with nobles in public. During her shopping spree, Carrera even discussed this matter with Sylvanie but still couldn't make any sense of it. However, she remembered Sylvanie accidentally blurted out a sentence. Maybe it's because he's been through life and death, so his personality has changed a lot. As Carrera thought of Sylvanie's words earlier, she silently nodded. It was possible. Experiencing something close to death, gaining a different perspective on things, and thus undergoing a personality change were quite normal things to happen. We're back. At that moment, Archie's voice interrupted Carrera's train of thoughts. Archie, Senna, and the four tall, short, fat, and skinny youths seemed to be acting together, and now they were all back, joining the rest. However, the expressions on their faces were not very good, a look of anger but reluctance to speak. Especially Senna, his discontent completely written on his face. What happened to you? Sylvanie curiously asked. Humph, could it be that your desired female slave was bought by someone else? Carrera asked disdainfully. It seemed she guessed right. Don't say. Senna said ill-humoredly. That guy is too horrible, he didn't leave any for us and bought them all. The four tall, short, fat, and skinny youths nodded in agreement with Senna's view. That guy? Carrera asked, intrigued. Which guy is so wealthy that he bought all the slaves you wanted? The value of a slave depended mainly on the individual. If they were only labor without any skills, the value would be very low, and a wealthy merchant could buy a large batch at once without much cost. But if they had additional value, that was a different story. For example, if they possessed impressive combat abilities, their value would skyrocket. Moreover, for female slaves, their appearance was their greatest additional value. The more beautiful they were, the more valuable they became. In the case of slaves specially marked on the royal market's promotional parchment, their looks were undoubtedly top-notch, and their prices were definitely high. Someone who could buy all these slaves, not leaving a single one for others, was truly rich. Carrera and Sylvanie were curious about the identity of this so-called guy. Riesel, on the other hand, paid no attention to their discussion, not even casting a glance at them. However, in the next moment, Archie's words suddenly caught his attention. He said he is the son of the Basalo family. Archie revealed. Basalo family? You mean that Marquis family? Carrera asked in surprise. Yet. Archie nodded and helplessly added. He's the eldest son of the Basalo family, the chosen next heir of the family. He bought almost all the valuable slaves in the slave district. When we got there, it seemed like he was only interested in buying slaves with combat abilities. But as soon as he spotted the female slaves we had our eyes on, he just swooped in and grabbed them without a second thought. Senna exclaimed, her face full of indignation. Isn't he just too cocky? So what if he's cocky? Carrera shook her head. He's from a Marquis family and the chosen heir at that. Do you really want to pick a fight with him? Hearing that, Senna instantly fell silent. Fight with the heir of a Marquis family? Him, someone from a mere Viscount family? No, he didn't want to be kicked out of Yelovaya. Just let it go, Senna. Archie sighed. We can't afford to provoke him. Let's just forget about it. Everyone very much agreed with his words. The difference in status brought by noble titles was evident from this situation. Only Riesel, upon hearing their discussion, squinted his eyes. Buying all slaves with combat abilities, hey! Smelling something fishy, he began to ponder. Chapter 95, Ambush. The Basalo family's affairs didn't cause much of a stir in the royal market. In this exclusive market open to nobles and wealthy merchants, spending extravagantly was nothing out of the ordinary. The real attention-grabbing events, however, usually occurred only during the monthly auctions. That was the battlefield where nobles, wealthy merchants, and various powerful forces fought tooth and nail, and it was there that truly great acts could capture the spotlight. Although Archie and his friends were unhappy with the domineering behavior of the Basalo family, they couldn't afford to provoke them and had to swallow their frustrations this time. Riesel, on the other hand, returned empty-handed, failing to obtain the desired swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Carrera and Sylvanie, the only girls within the group, returned almost loaded with goods. As soon as they left the royal market, their bodyguards swiftly loaded all their purchases onto the carriage. Anyone unaware might have thought they were wholesale merchants stocking up. The entire group's gathering came to an end just like that. I'll head back first. Riesel said calmly to the group. So soon? Archie hastily tried to persuade him. Not staying for the second half. No, it's about time. Riesel shook his head. I'm currently living under someone else's roof, so it's not good to stay out too late. His reasoning left Archie, who had wanted to persuade him to stay longer, with no choice but to give up. What could he say when Riesel brought up Yuri? Archie couldn't provoke Riesel's rebellious temperament with statements like "don't be such a killjoy" or "men need freedom" like he used to. Times had changed, he couldn't stimulate Riesel's rebellious nature with those words anymore. All right. Archie said with regret. Let's find another opportunity to get together next time then. Sure. Riesel nodded faintly, then turned away without any lingering sentiment and walked toward the exit. There, a carriage arranged by the Frenzel family had already been brought over by the coachman. Riesel entered the carriage, followed by Anne and Ian, who walked in without looking back, not sparing a glance at Archie's group. Before long, the carriage departed, leaving the group of 8 standing silently. They watched as the carriage adorned with the Frenzel family crest faded into the distance, seemingly caught in a mix of emotions. We're leaving too. Carrera finally spoke, still holding Sylvanie's hand. Oh. Archie didn't try to keep her and just looked disinterested. Careful on the road. Carrera pursed her lips, neither confirming nor denying. She just intended to leave with Sylvanie as soon as possible. However, before departing, Carrera uttered a sentence. I advise you not to scheme against him. He's different from before, no longer the naive country boy easily swayed by your tricks. I don't know what you're talking about. Archie smiled slightly. Riesel is my good friend. Why would I trick him? If that's how you want to put it, then consider it that way. Carrera looked meaningfully at him. I'm just reminding you based on our long-standing friendship. Whether you choose to listen is up to you. After saying that, she was silent for a while before sighing. I have a feeling that the severe injury over a month ago truly transformed Riesel. Leaving behind that contemplative remark, Carrera, along with the silently pondering Sylvanie, walked toward their carriage and left. Archie, with a stern face, stared at Carrera's departing carriage, remaining speechless for a long time. Watching Archie like this, the 4 tall, short, fat, and skinny youths dared not even breathe loudly. Only Senna could gather the courage to ask Archie. Weren't you supposed to get Riesel to introduce you to Marquis Frenzel? Why haven't you spoken up? Senna asked doubtfully. Are you dumb? Archie retorted coldly. Lost contact for over a month, and the moment we meet, I want him to help introduce me to her. If you were in his shoes, how would you feel? Needless to say, suspicions would arise, questioning if Archie deliberately arranged this meeting for that purpose. Hearing the reason, Senna instantly fell silent. We can't rush this. Archie said with a calm demeanor. Carrera is right, Riesel has indeed changed. If we still treat him like the old him, we might end up in trouble. Hence, he suppressed his inner impulse and refrained from being too hasty. Let's give it some time and invite him out more often during this stretch. Once he lets his guard down, we can bring up this topic. Archie suggested in a calm tone. He had that amount of patience and waiting. Following your lead. Senna nodded. Little did Archie and Senna know that there wouldn't be a next time. After going back, inform the servants that any letters or meeting requests from Archie and his people are to be declined. Riesel calmly spoke while gazing at the scenery outside from inside the carriage. Anne and Ian both looked puzzled. Is that okay? Ian questioned. Aren't they your friends, Mr. Riesel? They need to truly consider me a friend for that to happen. Riesel retorted without hesitation. After meeting them, you'll also probably understand. Except for Carrera and Sylvanie, the rest have their own agenda. The way Archie and his group acted was close to outright telling Riesel that they were in cahoots. Whether it was Senna or the 4 tall, short, fat, and skinny youths, they had likely all been recruited by Archie and were now under his control. Though the Rhine family's second son appeared to spend his days fooling around, he was secretly building his own influence and accumulating connections. His group was the fruit of his efforts. Riesel had reason to suspect that the Lahm family, to which Senna belonged, as well as the families behind the 4 tall, short, fat, and skinny youths, had already been won over by Archie and had become his supporters, much like Riesel himself, who was also recruited and chosen for his innate talent to become a future tactical class magician. However, Carrera and Sylvanie's positions were a bit delicate. Sylvanie seemed to leave the decision to Carrera without any notable actions. Carrera, on the other hand, had a somewhat estranged relationship with Archie, appearing to be part of the group but keeping a certain distance. Unlike the others, Carrera wasn't as harmonious with Archie. All of those were things the original Riesel hadn't discovered. Riesel only grasped their personalities and attitudes after this meeting. After understanding them, he made a decisive decision: these people weren't worth befriending. From now on, it would be better not to meet them ever again. Riesel decided firmly. A wise choice. Anne agreed with a nonchalant expression. Without a doubt, she had also formed a negative impression of Archie and his group after observing them. Yes, it's for the best, Ian said, looking thoughtful. At least, this way, the lady won't be involved. However, as Riesel was about to respond, he suddenly froze. Anne and Ian looked at silent Riesel, puzzled, but shortly afterward, they seemed to notice something and began to squint their eyes. In the perception of the three, the carriage that had been running steadily suddenly came to a halt. All around, for some unknown reason, it became eerily silent. There were no more voices except for the coachman who had jumped off the carriage, frantically preparing to run away. Halt! Anne shouted coldly, swiftly leaping out of the carriage with a swoosh, catching the coachman who was about to run away. The coachman was instantly frightened and screamed loudly. It's not my fault. Those guys threatened me to bring the carriage here. I had no choice. The coachman's scream prompted Riesel and Ian to step down from the carriage. Riesel remained calmly composed, while Ian's face turned serious, gripping her sword tightly. The three surveyed the area and realized they were in a secluded dark alley, surrounded by buildings. Only a couple of narrow alleys led elsewhere. The stone brick pavement underfoot was spacious enough to easily accommodate the luxurious carriage of the Frenzel family, resembling a small square. Anne threw off the yelling coachman and positioned herself in front of Riesel. Ian did the same, standing side by side with Anne, her sharp gaze focused ahead. Come out! Anne exclaimed coldly. Silence surrounded them, no one responded. However, Riesel knew those people had arrived, the people who had caused severe injuries to the original Riesel and the reason for his transmigration. Whoosh! Suddenly, a faint sky-splitting sound emerged. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. In the next moment, countless sky-splitting sounds echoed successively. Arrows tore through the sky, shooting from above the buildings in all directions. Riesel, Anne, and Ian were instantly surrounded by a rain of arrows, with no way up or down. Fortunately, the two female knights were already prepared. Quick, take cover! Ian embraced Riesel, and with a swift step, turned into a blur, flying away to avoid the incoming arrows. Squing! Anne drew her long sword from her waist and swept it horizontally to deflect the incoming arrows. Cling, clang, cling, clang. In the open space of the dark alley, the sound of arrows piercing the stone brick ground continued, turning the area into a battlefield filled with arrows. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, several figures leaped down from the tops of the buildings and landed on the ground. Chapter 96, Swordmaster. Thud, 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 thud. Multiple stepping sounds erupted as the heels of the attackers landed, descending from the sky. Upon landing, they swiftly glided toward Riesel's direction. Magical energy fluctuated subtly in their bodies, and one by one, unsheathed their swords, aiming directly at him. Riesel, held by Ian, looked up and saw faces adorned with half-masks. These masked attackers were cloaked, wearing iron masks that covered only their noses and mouths, their eyes fixed on him with murderous intent. In such a situation, Ian wouldn't allow them to approach any further. After releasing Riesel, she made a swift move and instantly appeared in front of the attackers, almost like teleportation. Ha ha! Ian shouted and swung her sword, creating a ripple of magical energy, slashing through the frontmost attacker. Clang! The attacker hastily raised their sword, intending to parry, but was sent flying along with their weapon, creating a resonant clash of metal. Whoosh! Ian swiftly moved, slashing and repelling each attacker, displaying unmatched power. On the other side, Anne swung her sword fiercely, creating a roaring wind that deflected incoming arrows. In the next moment, with a stomp on the ground that shattered the ground, she soared onto the roof of a building, disappearing from sight. Pu-chi, 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 Pu-chi. The next instant, blood splattered atop the surrounding buildings, the glistening light of a sword flickering in the midst of it. Soon, the rain of arrows finally ceased. Boom! Seeing this, Ian kicked away an attacker charging at her. Wanting to finish them as soon as possible, her sword transformed into continuous flashes of light, creating a spectacle of swordplay as she slashed every attacker in front of her. Undoubtedly, these attackers were highly skilled, almost superhuman by Riesel's previous life standards. However, facing the two swordswomen as graceful as flowers, they had no chance, instantly crumbling before their prowess. Humph! A cold snort of a man suddenly resounded. A tall figure leaped from the rooftop of a building, but before landing, he forcefully kicked the wall of a building, causing it to crack open. His body transformed into a bullet, heading straight toward Ian. Sensing danger, Ian's expression changed slightly. She abruptly turned and, without hesitation, used a quick slash to emit a flash-like strike toward the newcomer. Ding! The two swords clashed in mid-air, sparking intense sparks and a loud noise. Ian attempted to kick, but the newly arrived attacker's reaction was faster. In mid-air, his waist twisted, body spiraled like a top, flying toward the rear. Who? Ian asked coldly as she held her slender sword in one hand, pointing horizontally, while the other hand gripped a scabbard at her waist. Not answering, the attacker coldly eyed Ian and abruptly dodged to the right, evading a heavy strike from behind. Boom! A large blood-stained longsword, resembling a great sword, fiercely cleaved into the ground, shattering the floor and raising a cloud of dust. Anne appeared behind the attacker at some point, but unfortunately, her attack didn't land. However, there was no trace of disappointment on her face as she coldly watched the attacker evade her attack, her eyes were sharp with determination. Tisk! The attacker clicked his tongue as he glanced at Anne, then at Ian, left speechless. The two bodyguards by the target's side are unexpectedly two sword masters. No wonder there are no others around. Unlike magicians, the level of swordsmen couldn't be easily confirmed by appearance. The levels of magicians could be distinguished quite easily, but swordsmen were different. Even those who practiced special swordsmanship could lose to someone who had spent a dozen or more years on elementary swordsmanship if their abilities were lacking. As a result, swordsmen were not like magicians, their level and strength couldn't be easily discerned. However, to address this, each country on the Akasha continent had established systems to measure the strength and level of swordsmen. The title of sword master was born out of this. When a swordsman possessed strength far beyond the average, they would be awarded the so-called sword master medal by the royal family or local nobles, signifying honor and ability. Ordinary swordsmen were considered soldiers, merely lower-level novices. However, sword masters were different. Genus had regulations that anyone receiving the sword master medal could, if willing, join the kingdom's knightly order and become a court knight, leading a group of knights. Major nobles also welcomed sword masters, and their loyalty was highly valued. Sometimes, their treatment even surpassed that of highly skilled magicians. Yet now, two swordsmen of sword master caliber existed in the same place, at the same time. Yes, Anne and Ian were sword masters who had received the sword master medal. With combat abilities equivalent to facing 1,000 opponents, their strength was enough to make Yuri entrust Riesel's safety to them without worry. Among her many attendants, Marilyn excluded, these two were the strongest. Faced with two powerful sword masters, the lower half of the attacker's face, covered by an iron mask, seemed to contort. It was only at this moment that Anne and Ian got a clear look at each other's appearance. This newly arrived attacker was a burly man, wielding a wide-bladed sword, with no cloak on his body, but still wearing the same mask as the other attackers, covering the lower half of his face. "Who are you?" Anne asked, sounding overbearing. The burly man didn't answer, only turned his gaze toward Riesel, who was watching coldly from the side, then glanced at his people in cloaks all around, speaking in a low voice. "Go kill the target." After saying that, the burly man rushed toward Anne. Unexpectedly, despite his thick and strong body, he moved surprisingly fast, like a charging tank or war chariot, creating a whistling sound of strong winds, blurring Anne's eyes. "Ian, protect Mr. Riesel." Leaving those words behind, Anne also charged toward the burly man, not willing to show weakness. Clang! The intense metal collision sound echoed in the next moment. Clang, cling, clang, cling, clang. Following it were innumerable sword lights, colliding with each other, creating sparks and bursts of collision sounds, occupying a corner of the dark alley. Anne and the burly man engaged in a heated battle as soon as they clashed. Anne swung her long sword fiercely, effortlessly producing streaks of sword light with explosive sounds, aiming to cut the burly man in half. The burly man rotated his wide-bladed sword like a windmill, using heavy sword edge flicks to counter each of her attacks, and dissipated the sword light unleashed by her. They moved and clashed relentlessly, leaving marks on the ground and walls around them. Is this man also a sword master? Seeing the battle of the two, Ian looked dignified, not standing still but following Anne's instructions, swiftly moving to protect Riesel. The other attackers, crawling up from the ground, showed no fear even when their conditions were already miserable. Like emotionless machines, they advanced instead of retreating, surrounding Ian. Ian tightened the slender sword in her hand, unaffected, waiting for them to approach. Only when they came close did she launch an attack, sending out countless cold sword lights to pierce them. However, these attackers were clearly fearless. Some blocked her attacks with their swords and were forced to retreat by the crisp collision sounds. Others didn't react in time, receiving cuts on their shoulders, sides, thighs, and even their jaws, blood spraying. Yet, they continued to relentlessly charge at her, ignoring their injuries and attacking her like machines, overwhelming her in no time. Their reckless display truly surprised Ian. Whoosh! Suddenly, an arrow flew from somewhere, aiming straight from Riesel's behind. No! Ian, hearing the whistling sound of the arrow, abruptly changed her expression and without hesitation, turned and rushed toward Riesel. Damn it! Anne, who was locked in a fierce battle with the burly man, wanted to provide support but was forced back by the wide-bladed sword's 3 consecutive strikes, making her retreat. The attackers once again swarmed Ian, hindering her movements. Without anyone interfering, the arrow violently shot toward Riesel without hindrance, its icy arrowhead aimed toward his head. Unfortunately. Clang! It was intercepted by a bright silver short sword. In a flash of silver light, with a crisp sound, the incoming arrow was deflected effortlessly. Riesel stood still, unmoving. With the bright silver short sword gripped in his hand, his body maintained a posture as if he had just casually swung it to the side. His expression stayed calm, his gaze composed. At that moment, everyone froze and wore expressions of shock. Chapter 97, Ah! Mr. Riesel, you! The closest to Riesel, Ian, had already halted her steps, staring at him who held a bright silver short sword with a face filled with shock. The others were in a similar state, their reactions momentarily delayed at seeing him effortlessly flicking away the arrow with his sword. Originally considered useless in the eyes of everyone, Riesel, supposed to lack combat ability, suddenly became the center of attention. However, when everyone was still in a daze, the unexpected happened. Clang! The first to react was the burly man, who seized the opportunity to forcefully cleave Anne, catching her off guard and sending her body flying. Ignoring the sparks erupting between them, he turned, displaying astonishing speed that defied his body size, charging toward Riesel like a bull. Stop! Mr. Riesel! Cries from Anne and Ian rang out, but it was already too late. The burly man didn't waste any words. Looking into Riesel's eyes, he emanated a murderous aura as his wide-bladed sword, like falling thunder, descended upon Riesel's head with formidable power. The burly man's strike cleaved through the air, carrying intense magical energy. Swish! The whistling wind it created turned into a shockwave, causing Riesel's hair to flutter wildly and his forehead to sting. For an ordinary person, such a powerful strike would easily cleave through any resistance and split them in half. Even a sword master, if struck so violently, would undoubtedly meet certain death. Of course, provided the strike hit. Boom! When the explosion-like muffled sound echoed, the burly man's forceful strike landed on the ground, much like Anne's earlier long sword strike, shattering it to pieces. Rumble! Cracks spread like veins across the ground, and debris scattered in the tumultuous shockwave. What? The burly man stared at his missed strike, pupils contracting. As he still contemplated what had happened, in the next moment, Pucci! A silver gleam flashed, grazing the side of the burly man's torso and slicing it open. Riesel moved silently to the burly man's side, his expression cold and indifferent. The short sword in his hand moved extremely fast, leaving a trail of blood flowers. Gah! The burly man groaned in pain. Disregarding his own injuries, the burly man swung his sword in retaliation without hesitation, lifting his heavy wide-bladed sword to create a dust storm, slashing at his side. Unfortunately, his strike missed again, only stirring up a chaotic shockwave. In the next moment, Riesel's figure suddenly appeared on the other side of the burly man. Pucci! A flash of silver once again mercilessly cut through the side of the burly man's torso. It created a symmetrical pattern with the previous wound as his blood spurted forth. Arg! Bearing severe injury, the burly man's body wavered, but he still held on, refusing to collapse. Instead, he roared in a frenzied manner, launching a furious and reckless attack on Riesel. Bleeding profusely, with wounds tearing open, the burly man paid no attention to them. He focused on swinging his wide-bladed sword like a meat grinder, creating a fierce gust of wind without stopping. Swish, 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 swish. The burly man's sword edge whistled through the air. Coupled with consecutive sword light and powerful wind, he attacked Riesel from various directions, aiming to kill him without mercy. Impressive determination. Riesel finally broke his silence. His tone was as calm as his gaze, with only his figure resembling a leaf, swaying back and forth amidst the sword light and wind. His movements were minimal, his steps untroubled. With the slightest evasion through retreats, side steps, rotations, and steps, he gracefully avoided the burly man's relentless attacks. In the next second, Riesel finally counterattacked. Like a flash of cold light, his bright silver short sword moved silently, blurring his hand. In an instant, it pierced through the storm of sword edges created by the burly man, landing on his body. Puchi, 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 puchi. Whether it was the sword tip or the sword edge, Riesel's short sword swiftly passed through the burly man's body in the blink of an eye, cutting him open without resistance. The burly man's body flailed like tree branches in a storm, wildly swinging, as blood sprayed from every corner of his body. Before long, his entire body was covered in slash wounds, battered and bloodied. Arg! Under such severe injuries, the burly man finally couldn't hold on any longer. He let out a painful cry as the wide-bladed sword in his hand dropped to the ground. Kneeling on one knee, he became a miserable figure drenched in blood. This man, who could rival a sword master, was utterly powerless against Riesel. This was only natural. From the earlier battle between the burly man and Anne, as well as Ian's performance, Riesel quietly observed them and had roughly estimated the strength of these so-called sword masters. In his eyes, the strength of sword masters should be roughly on par with level 5 adventurers with the worst basic abilities. In Danmachi, as long as one basic ability reached D rank, it met the minimum requirements for leveling up, and at that point, accumulating enough exploits allowed for a smooth level up. In other words, the worst status would be leveling up with the condition of only one basic ability reaching D rank each time. Leveling up with this circumstance each time was undoubtedly quite terrible, since on the same level, disregarding magic and skills, meant being at the bottom. Facing such people, Riesel could effortlessly defeat several of them when he was still level 4, even without using his magic. Now, as a level 5 first-class adventurer, even without using magic, he could already surpass Ace, who was at the pinnacle of level 5. Considering all of this, he was basically no different from level 6. In this scenario, how could a level 5 with the worst status have any chance of fighting back against him? If Riesel were to use his magic, he could instantly annihilate anyone on that level. It was worth noting that among the magic he learned, there were several large-scale, wide-ranging destructive magic. With wide-area annihilation magic like Fusillade Fall Aurica in his hand, plus mage development ability and the extraordinary accumulation of latent basic ability of mag, wiping out a village or an army with a single magic attack was not an impossible feat for him. Interestingly, to destroy a village or an army with a single magic attack was considered tactical class magic in this world. In other words, upon returning from the world of Danmachi, although he was not yet comparable to the top-tier experts in this world such as the unbeatable sword saints in combat or strategic class magicians capable of destroying cities with one attack, he still stood as a top-tier existence within the middle. As a swordsman, he surpassed the sword masters capable of facing 1,000 foes in this world. As a magician, he was not far behind the tactical class magicians of this world. At least, Anne, Ian, and the blood-soaked burly man were definitely not his opponents, even if he didn't go all out. Nonetheless, Riesel's current performance was somewhat horrifying to those unaware of his true power. The intelligence was wrong, retreat. One of the attackers whispered, took a step back, and prepared to escape. The other attackers also retreated without hesitation, preparing to leave. No. I won't let you. Finally coming back to their senses, Anne and Ian quickly focused their attention on the fleeing attackers in the area and quickly rushed forward with their swords drawn to intercept. While their battle continued, the battle between Riesel and the burly man was nearing its end. Speak, where are you people from? Riesel asked, calmly holding a short sword and standing unguarded in front of the burly man without any expression. Hat. In response, the burly man only let out a cold sneer, and shortly afterward, there was no more movement. Feeling somewhat suspicious, Riesel frowned and quickly kicked the burly man down with one foot. Thud. The burly man's body fell, making no further movements. He was dead. Purple-black blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, evidently poisoning himself. Riesel stared at the lifeless burly man, silently contemplating. Not long after, the entire dark alley finally fell silent, and all battle noises ceased, returning everything to calm. Shortly after, Anne and Ian returned. They returned victorious, defeating all the attackers. The strength of these two female sword masters, even if they were level 5 with the worst status, was not something ordinary swordsmen could handle. "Are you okay, Mr. Riesel?" Ian quickly inquired. Anne remained silent, staring at him with a peculiar expression. "I'm fine." Riesel withdrew his gaze from the lifeless body of the burly man. "What about your side? This guy committed suicide. What happened to the others?" Upon hearing that, both Anne and Ian fell into silence. Evidently, the fate of other attackers was similar. At least, whether it was Anne or Ian, they both wanted to capture someone alive. After all, the identity of these attackers was unknown. Since they had been targeted and attacked, it was only natural to inquire about their identity and origin, as well as the mastermind behind them. Unfortunately, like Riesel, Anne and Ian were also helpless and returned empty-handed. Where did these people come from? Ian gazed at the lifeless burly man and muttered. They can abandon even a sword master without hesitation, resorting to suicide without a second thought once failed. Most major nobles wouldn't dare to do that, right? Sword masters were powerful warriors, capable of facing thousands in a battle. In a large kingdom like Gina's, they were considered crucial combat power. Which faction would be willing to abandon such skilled people? Yet, such a thing had happened. Could it be the heretic assassin? Riesel pondered, squinting his eyes. That underground organization, supposedly backed by at least a country, seemed even more complicated to him. "Let's go." Riesel shook his head and sheathed hermit. "Have the Frenzel family send some people to collect the corpses and investigate. Maybe we can find something." "Yes." Anne and Ian unconsciously agreed and nodded in response. Their attitude right now was no different from when facing their own master. Riesel's sudden display of exceptional strength left these two female sword masters in awe, making them instinctively follow his instructions. Unlike the previous situation where they obeyed him due to Yuri's orders, this time, they didn't even consider her when obeying him. As a result, Anne returned alone to the Frenzel residence to bring some people back to clean up the aftermath, while Riesel and Ian waited. Only after Anne returned with some people did the three of them sit back in the carriage, driven by the newly arrived coachman, heading back to the Frenzel residence. Chapter 98, Shadow. The Frenzel mansion, top floor office. At this moment, Riesel had already returned and was sitting before a desk, recounting everything that had happened today to Yuri. Anne and Ian stood behind him, occasionally adding a word, causing Yuri to stare straight at Riesel in silence. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Riesel asked with an awkward tone. Yuri's intense gaze made him a bit uncomfortable, and yet, she just continued to stare at him, as if trying to see through him. "No choice. Don't you want to explain?" Yuri said to him with a tone of uncertainty. "You defeated a sword master effortlessly, really?" Indeed, Anne and Ian had informed her about how Riesel defeated the burly attacker. Her gaze at him became increasingly uneasy, while Marilyn on the side also stared at him, giving off a feeling as if ready to interrogate him with force. In response, Riesel appeared nonchalant. "Ha! What do you want me to explain?" Riesel sighed before smiling. "Do I have to explain how fabulous I am to you?" "Fabulous?" Yuri showed a puzzled expression. "It means very amazing." Riesel answered, then paused for a second before continuing as if changing the subject. "First of all, you didn't ask, and I can't just simply tell you how amazing I am, can I?" After all, he wasn't a narcissist or a pretentious guy who liked to brag about himself without reason. "But isn't this a bit too much?" Yuri grumbled. "Didn't you just start learning swordsmanship? I've never heard that you practiced it before. You're clearly an expert who can easily defeat a sword master." That was the part that surprised her. She had long investigated Riesel, knowing all about his life story. Among these stories, nothing was proving that he had practiced swordsmanship. Even in the past, his attitude toward swordsmen was completely no different from how other magicians viewed them. He had a somewhat disdainful view magicians were noble beings, while swordsmen were mere laborers who understood nothing but killing. That was the arrogant mindset held by most magicians. In the past, Riesel was someone like that, aiming to become a tactical class magician, even a strategic class magician, to obtain a noble title from the kingdom, and becoming a noble. He genuinely looked down on swordsmen who could only serve as tools for the kingdom and nobles. Such Riesel, even during his time at the academy, already showed signs of being ignorant and incompetent, so how could he possibly study swordsmanship? Yet, all of those facts clashed entirely with the exceptional ability he displayed earlier. As a result, Yuri was genuinely surprised and amazed to learn that he effortlessly dealt with a swordsman of swordmaster caliber. Riesel was well aware of this situation. Considering the original Riesel's behavior, suddenly revealing such exceptional strength would undoubtedly astonish and raise doubts among those who knew him. However, Riesel had no intention of hiding it from Yuri. "I only had a little luck," Riesel said with a faint smile. "I'll tell you more about it when the opportunity arises." The implicit meaning behind his words was that, in this situation, it wasn't really appropriate to bring up this matter. It was only natural. Riesel didn't want to make the dimensional magic cube situation widely known. Even though Yuri was his lifesaver, when it came to this unbelievable matter, whether Yuri believed it or not was another story. For that reason, he didn't plan to explain too much. Yuri seemed to sense the implicit meaning behind his words, and although there was some difficulty accepting it, Riesel's unflinching gaze and focus softened her heart. "All right, let's leave this topic for now." Yuri sighed and redirected the conversation. "If we consider the outcome of this incident alone, it's quite worth celebrating. Wasn't it?" Despite the ambush, not only was Riesel unharmed, but he also gained sudden and powerful strength, undoubtedly bringing a sense of relief to her. At least now, he had some means of self-defense, avoiding the helpless situation he had been in before. It was indeed a good thing. It's just a pity that they all committed suicide. Trying to find out who instigated them and whether they were from the heretic assassin might become challenging. Yuri expressed regret. "Is there no way to investigate?" Riesel inquired. "Investigation's definitely needed, but whether we'll get results is hard to say." Yuri paused briefly before continuing. "From what you've said, they chose suicide without hesitation when they realized their task couldn't be completed. It suggests they're adept at handling such situations, swiftly taking action to conceal their secrets in the face of failure. In such circumstances, even if they investigated, it was likely they wouldn't find satisfying evidence. Because they already had a well-established set of responses like a code of conduct, it was certain they had considered what kind of investigation would follow once the one executing the task died and their people's corpse was taken away. Based on this point, I believe that even if we ask a court magician to use special magic to trace the memories of the corpses, it probably won't work all that well." What Yuri said made sense. Being able to abandon an expert sword master and let him and all those attackers willingly poison themselves to death after the task failed without hesitation, the mastermind behind them surely considered that their corpses would be investigated, and clues would be gathered using magic. If I'm not mistaken, those corpses are likely planted with counter-perception magic, mind magic, memory magic, and other means. So, we'll most likely not find any useful clues in our investigation," Yuri added. Upon hearing her explanation, Riesel furrowed his brow, but he didn't feel disheartened either. "Can't investigate, then so be it. At least, it's not without gains," Riesel remarked inwardly. Through this attack, he understood two things. 1. The enemy had not given up on taking his life. 2. For now, he could protect himself. Knowing his power level in this world, he wasn't in a hurry. If even a sword master could be easily defeated by him, any attempted attack on him would likely require a sword saint or a magician of the same level. Riesel didn't believe that someone would go to the lengths of sending a sword saint to deal with a somewhat talented minor character like himself. It was a matter of price, a question of whether it was worth it. He believed they might hesitate before deciding whether to act against him. This realization brought Riesel some peace of mind. "I'll ask the royal palace's court magician or the church's high priest to come and see if they can do something." Yuri didn't give up. "If there are any leads or information on this matter, I'll inform you." "Got it." Riesel nodded in agreement. The two continued discussing some details for a while before he finally left the office. In the office, only Yuri, Marilyn, Anne, and Ian remained. Yuri's relaxed attitude toward Riesel instantly vanished as her face quickly became expressionless. Speak. Yuri directed her gaze at Anne and Ian. What have you two found? She keenly sensed that Anne and Ian had something to say. Otherwise, they would have walked away after their task was completed rather than staying in the office to discuss more confidential topics with Riesel. Hearing their master's question, Anne and Ian exchanged glances. My lady. Ian lowered her voice. The skills of those people seem somewhat like those from the shadow. Upon hearing that, not only Yuri's but even Marilyn's expression changed abruptly. Are you sure? Yuri unconsciously leaned forward. I'm not certain, but it really seems like it. Anne chimed in, unusually talkative. I've fought with the sword master. Even though he wields a seemingly heavy broadsword, his speed, which doesn't match his big body, and his combat style, which minimizes all movements and sounds that come with his actions, resemble the Shadow's favored swordsmanship, the hazy strike sword style. As Yuri heard the explanation, her face gradually sank, while her hands placed on the desk tightened bit by bit. A dreadful magical energy emanated slowly from her body, and a cold expression appeared on her face. In other words, the people who targeted Riesel weren't the heretic assassin, but rather the Shadow Knights working directly for the royal family. Yuri's words, spoken slowly and deliberately, sent shivers down one's spine. It was a secret known to only a select few of high status. Within Gina's, there existed an assassination unit. Members of this unit were referred to as the Shadow Knight. Only those belonging to the royal family could be aware of their existence and possessed the privilege to mobilize them. Since Anne and Ian mentioned that the attackers resembled the Shadow, it strongly suggested that the one who attacked Riesel was likely the Shadow Knights. Now, the question was, who could dispatch the Shadow Knights to assassinate Riesel? The answer was almost self-evident. The only thing Yuri couldn't comprehend was why someone from the royal family would target Riesel. However, before she could figure out this matter, Marilyn, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke up. In the past, Mr. Riesel seemed quite close to the daughter of the Elliot family. With a simple remark from Marilyn, Yuri understood everything. Because the Elliot family was a vassal of a certain Duke family. Furthermore, this Duke family had been rather unruly in recent years, harboring thoughts deemed unacceptable for the current king and the royal family. In such a situation, when a promising future great magician like Riesel suddenly made contact with someone who was related to this Duke family, it was only natural for some people from the royal family to react strongly. In other words, Riesel simply had become entangled in political struggles, almost becoming a pawn in political machinations. Marilyn, prepare the carriage. Yuri stood up and spoke with a cold tone and expression. I'm going to the royal palace. Chapter 99, Breaking Steel Sword Style. Next day, early morning. In the courtyard next to the Frenzel mansion's pavilion, Riesel stood with a wooden sword, ready for an attack. His eyes were tightly shut. Maintaining his posture unchanged, the hand holding the sword showed no sign of trembling. His entire body stood still, resembling a swordsman's statue. Phew! Ha! Despite his stillness, Riesel softly breathed, sometimes inhaling a large amount of air and then exhaling it. His breathing rhythm became peculiar, fluctuating between fast and slow, loud and nearly inaudible. The volume of his inhalations and exhalations varied. One moment, he took in an abundant amount of air, and after a while, the air he exhaled was meager. In the previous moment, he didn't inhale much, but when he exhaled, a considerable amount of air was expelled. Riesel continued this unique breathing pattern, creating an odd rhythm. As time passed, subtle fluctuations of magical energy emanated from his body, like invisible steam rising, swirling around him. After a while, he suddenly opened his eyes and finally moved. Swish! The sharp sound of cutting through the air echoed. Riesel swiftly swung his sword, as if an opponent appeared before him, launching an attack. His speed was astonishing to the point that the sound of the wooden sword slicing through the air was exceptionally clear. His wrist and arm moved flexibly, carrying an indescribable power, repeatedly striking at an imaginary enemy before him. Upon closer inspection, his sword movements not only lacked hesitation but were also remarkably fluid, flowing as if he were dancing gracefully and seemed pleasing to the eye. However, the surrounding atmosphere around Riesel's body was chaotic. Each swing from his wooden sword seemed as if a steel sword was wielded, giving a sense that it could cut through anything. Its power was overwhelming, making his momentum grow stronger. Simultaneously, the magical energy swirling around his body slowly seeped into his muscles, as if being absorbed by his entire body. In this way, while practicing his swordsmanship, Riesel accumulated momentum over time. After a while, an astonishing oppressive aura emanated from him, causing passing servants to feel a shiver down their spines and even alarming some guards. It wasn't until about half an hour later that he finally stopped. Huff! A breath of stale air escaped his mouth, forming a small vortex that swept all around. Riesel's entire body became damp, soaked in sweat, though his breathing remained untroubled, his muscles trembled slightly as if reaching a limit or experiencing pleasure. Feeling the condition of his body, he couldn't help but reveal a satisfied expression. Sure enough, my theory was right. Riesel muttered to himself. With the abundant magical energy of this body, once I practice swordsmanship, activate the magical energy in my damaged gate, and use it to strengthen my body, progress becomes amazingly fast. On this day, he officially began practicing this world's swordsmanship. Just now, his peculiar breath was the breathing style ingrained in his practiced swordsmanship. Coordinating with the swordsmanship recorded in the book, he smoothly activated the magical energy inside him and began absorbing it into his body. Fortunately, the effect was satisfactory. Although only half an hour of practice had passed, Riesel could already feel the changes in his body. Let's update my status. Deep in thought, Riesel couldn't help but retrieve a bottle of Loki's blood from the dimensional magic cube storage space. Riesel pulled open the bottle, poured out a drop of Loki's blood, and dabbed it on his forehead. This was the effect of the self-redemption skill, a way to autonomously update status. Since he couldn't touch his own back and modify the status on his back, he could only trigger the effect of self-redemption in this way, letting the skill handle the updating of his status independently. In this situation, Loki's blood seeped into Riesel's forehead, disappearing from view. At this moment, if someone were to remove his clothes and look at his back, they would see a shimmering light curtain. Sacred text floated out of the light curtain as if assembling something, undergoing changes, interweaving, colliding, and covering each other. When the sacred text returned to his back and the light curtain disappeared, his mind was suddenly filled with a series of mental images. Accepting these mental images, he read his new status. Riesel Brynhart. Level 5. STR, I0G284. End, I0G257. Dex, I0F312. AGI, I0F331. Mag, I0F305. Lightweight, G. Swordsman, G. Mage, H. Battle Adept, I. Is this the status updated by self-redemption? Riesel curiously observed the status in his mind and secretly nodded. Total basic ability proficiency has increased by over 1,400. For my current level, achieving this level of growth speed is quite impressive. After about 6 days back in the main world, he had already raised his 3 favored basic abilities Dex, AGI and Mag to F rank, and also raised STR and N to G rank. This growth rate was considered cheating compared to adventurers who struggled for years at level 5 to see significant improvements. Of course, his current growth speed was mediocre compared to his past self, but he was no longer a rookie, he was a genuine first-class adventurer now. With higher levels, the growth of status slowed down, which was to be expected. Additionally, he could no longer enter the dungeon and hunt monsters daily in this world. However, the fact that he managed to raise the total basic ability proficiency by over 1,400 in just 6 days through self-practice was something that would envy any adventurer. If there were a special swordsmanship to practice, my growth speed should increase further. Riesel thought inwardly with a hint of regret. Unfortunately, for now, I can only choose a superior advanced swordsmanship to practice. His chosen swordsmanship that came from Yuri's library had a simple name: Breaking Steel Sword Style. Practicing this swordsmanship not only had a more efficient growth rate than ordinary advanced swordsmanship but, in the later stages, it would allow magical energy to cover the weapon, significantly enhancing its performance. Breaking Steel Sword Style's effects, such as cutting through steel, breaking enemy weapons, and even destroying enemy body armor, could be considered a kind of magic attribute or magic effect. For that reason, it was quite close to the domain of special swordsmanship. While Breaking Steel Sword Style was an advanced swordsmanship, it was the most powerful in its class, closely approaching special swordsmanship. If its effects on body refining, magical energy absorption, and growth promotion were not slightly weaker than special swordsmanship, it could easily have entered the domain of special swordsmanship. Nevertheless, this was the best and strongest swordsmanship that Riesel could find in Yuri's library. So, when he saw it, he chose it without hesitation. Though he regretted being unable to practice genuine special swordsmanship, breaking steel sword style was an advanced swordsmanship closely resembling special swordsmanship, which satisfied him just as well. I'll practice this swordsmanship in my free time and try to develop the break steel technique soon. While making that decision, Riesel picked up his wooden sword and resumed practicing. But this time, he was not practicing breaking steel sword style, he was practicing holy dragon sword style. This swordsmanship may not bring effective growth to my status, but it innately possesses powerful sword techniques. Studying and honing it can still improve my combat skills. Riesel found it challenging to let go of holy dragon sword style. After all, it was the first swordsmanship he encountered, and it held a unique place in his heart. He was reluctant to completely abandon it. After this, let's spend an hour each day practicing holy dragon sword style. Riesel decided. And so, he alternated between practicing two swordsmanship while improving his own status and combat skills, spending a considerable amount of time near the pavilion in the courtyard. It wasn't until around noon that his routine was unexpectedly interrupted by a carriage entering the Frenzel residence. Glancing at the carriage, Riesel noticed Yuri and Marilyn stepping out of it. Oh, did they go out? Riesel paused, slightly taken aback. He had been practicing swordsmanship here since early morning and hadn't seen Yuri and Marilyn leave. Yuri noticed his figure and waved at him. Returning the gesture with a wave, Riesel put down his wooden sword and walked over to her. Good morning. Yuri greeted. Are you practicing swordsmanship? Yet. Riesel nodded. Where did you go? The royal palace. I had some matters to take care of. Yuri replied casually. As for the specifics of the matters, she didn't elaborate, and he didn't press further either. You didn't happen to go out last night, stayed up all night, and just came back now, did you? Riesel remarked in astonishment as he observed the faint signs of weariness on her face. Did you notice? Yuri chuckled before shaking her head. Don't worry about it. If solving things only requires a bit of fatigue, then it's definitely a win for me. Her words carried a sense of mysteriousness. Riesel silently watched her face, refraining from further conversation. No wonder he didn't notice her departure at all, she had already departed since last night, after all. By the way. Yuri lifted her gaze to his eyes. Prepare yourself. We're probably leaving the royal capital tomorrow and returning to my territory. Tomorrow? Got it. Riesel nodded. Yuri smiled at him and, accompanied by the silent Marilyn, immediately headed back inside the mansion. After watching the two enter the mansion, Riesel turned back and resumed his swordsmanship practice near the pavilion. However, this time, he practiced with even more determination and effort. Chapter 100, Everyone's Responses. Yuri's instructions about leaving the royal capital were given swiftly. Under the orders of this young lady, the entire mansion's servants and guards sprang into action, making preparations for tomorrow's journey. Accompanying her on this trip would be Riesel and Marilyn, while Anne and Ian serve as her attendants. Additionally, a fully manned knightly order of 100 would act as her bodyguard, escorting her back to the Frenzel territory. It was only today that Riesel laid eyes on the Frenzel family's knightly order. Nobles had the privilege of forming a knightly order, a fact Riesel was well aware of. While they couldn't match the kingdom's knightly orders, which could number in the thousands, the higher the noble rank, the larger the knightly order under their command. A baron had 100 men. A viscount had 300 men. A count had 500 men. A marquis had 700 men. A duke had 1,000 men. This was a privilege granted by the kingdom, giving nobles a certain degree of military authority. Yuri was a marquis, and not just any marquis at that. As a chief court magician and a strategic class magician, she enjoyed several privileges. The kingdom allowed her to expand her knightly order by an additional 100, granting her a force of up to 800 knights. Under her command, these 800 knights were divided into 8 squads. One squad remained by her side as a bodyguard, while the remaining 7 guarded the Frenzel territory, ensuring its safety. In other words, wherever she went, she was accompanied by at least 100 knights as bodyguards, showcasing both grandeur and considerable combat power. These knights differed from the mansion's guards who patrolled, stood watch, and maintained order. They were genuine soldiers with powerful combat skills. Anne and Ian were responsible for supervising and training these knights, so Riesel had not encountered them before today, nor had he met anyone from the Frenzel family's knightly order. Today marked the summoning of this knightly order back to the residence. They stood in formation around the mansion, awaiting the signal to depart. Their appearance was neat. Riesel took a rough estimate and observed the strength of this knightly order. Calculating with the lowest latent basic abilities, these knights are probably between level 3 and level 4. Riesel thought to himself. This was 100 second-class adventurers. Even considering Loki Familia, excluding the strength of executives, they were probably no match for this knightly order, right? Furthermore, there were at least 700 of these knights left within the Frenzel territory. Adding sword masters like Marilyn, Anne, and Ian, all equivalent to level 5 adventurers with the lowest latent basic abilities, the Frenzel family's combat power was strong enough to leave Riesel speechless. He might not lose to any one of these people, but facing so many alone would be troublesome. Not to mention, within the Frenzel family, there was also Yuri, a strategic class magician. This was someone whose magic could burn down a city or a small country in a single strike akin to a nuclear weapon. With such attack power, even Riveria, renowned as Orario's strongest mage, was far surpassed. In other words, Yuri, as a strategic class magician, was definitely stronger than level 6 Riveria by a significant margin. At least, Riesel didn't believe that Riveria, even at level 7, could unleash magic that could destroy a city or even a small country in a single strike. Therefore, conservatively estimating, Yuri's attack power should surpass level 7. With such attack power, if she successfully released her magic, Riesel would probably be dead even if he had 10 lives. Of course, the usage requirements for strategic class magic were strict. It wasn't easy to release. However, with 800 knights equivalent to second-class adventurers guarding, plus numerous sword master attendants, Riesel didn't have confidence in breaking through this defense before Yuri cast her strategic class magic on him. This showed how powerful her combat power was. Now that I think about it, a strategic class magician already has attack power surpassing level 7. What about the power of a sword saint, hailed as invincible in combat? Riesel couldn't help but wonder. As far as he knew, there were 3 ways for a swordsman to achieve the title of sword saint. First, acquire a sword master medal, attain the status of sword master, challenge other sword masters, and upon consecutively defeating 1,000 of them, one would receive a kingdom commendation, be awarded a sword saint medal, and ascend to the rank of sword saint. Second, acquire a sword master medal, achieve the status of a sword master, challenge a sword saint, and upon defeating them, one would similarly receive a kingdom commendation, be awarded a sword saint medal, and be recognized as a sword saint. Third, gain worldwide recognition for possessing the strength of sword saint, obtain a recommendation from another sword saint, and if the royal family acknowledges and believes that one genuinely qualifies as a sword saint, one can be officially awarded the title of sword saint in a public ceremony. Those were the 3 ways to become a sword saint, each requiring strength as proof. It was undoubtedly much more challenging than becoming a tactical class or strategic class magician by being able to cast magic at the corresponding class. The path to becoming a sword saint was a road paved with pure strength, and every sword saint was a genuine powerhouse. In this way, the fame and popularity of a sword saint were unquestionable. Even magicians who held themselves in high regard dared not underestimate such figures. The status of a sword saint might be slightly less than a strategic class magician's, but it far surpassed that of a tactical class magician. Calculating it all like this, Riesel started to form speculation. Sword saint. Even the worst should be around level 7, right? Riesel could only estimate. He hadn't seen a sword saint in action, so he wasn't sure about the specific strength of characters at this level. However, to be recognized as a sword saint, one had to defeat 1,000 sword masters, and consecutively at that. If one were only a level 6, who had a strength of just above sword masters, it would be an impossible feat. Therefore, a sword saint should be able to match up against at least a level 7 adventurer at the lowest, according to Riesel's speculation. It seems that whether it's a sword saint or a strategic class magician, I still have a long way to go. Hey! Riesel finally felt the pressure. In this world, he was positioned as a sword master and a tactical class magician. While an average sword master might not be his opponent, he could only be considered an outstanding swordsman among them, falling short if compared to sword saint. He was comparable to a tactical class magician in terms of magic, not lagging too far behind. Such him could be called a powerhouse, but definitely not the top powerhouse in high-end combat power. Unfortunately, he couldn't slack off and took it slow since he also had a seemingly mysterious organization targeting him. With an organization backed up by at least a country, even if they didn't have a strategic class magician, they probably had 1 or 2 sword saints. I need to work harder. Riesel was already considering finding an opportunity for his second-dimensional travel. On the day of his return, he had 23 units of dimensional energy left. The dimensional magic cube absorbed 1 unit of energy per day. Now, around 6 days had passed, so he had gained a total of 30 units of energy, enough for a random dimensional travel. This world lacks dungeons, and there aren't many enemies to defeat. Even though practicing swordsmanship hasn't halted my growth, if I want to grow faster, I should go to other worlds. Even if he ended up in a peaceful world, he could use the different time ratio to train for a while in other worlds. Alright, I'll take some time off and then dive into another dimensional travel. Riesel made a decision. And so, as everyone in the Frenzel residence was busy preparing for the journey, the news quickly spread, reaching many who were interested in Yuri. Among them were also some with malicious intentions. What? She plans to return to her family territory. Archie, who was making hidden arrangements at home, quickly stood up upon hearing the news from his subordinate. He was anxious. No, in a few days, father will choose his heir. If she isn't in the royal capital at that time, what am I going to do? Archie paced back and forth, unable to sit still, and in the end, left the house. He got into a carriage heading toward the Frenzel residence as quickly as possible. However, apart from him, another person had an extreme reaction to Yuri's plan to leave the royal capital and return to her territory. Hurry! Issue the orders. Carry out the plan as scheduled. A somewhat frail-looking young man yelled at his steward, his face filled with urgency. Yes, young master. In front of the young man, the steward hastily responded while bowing his head before hurrying downstairs. The young man remained alone in the room, sitting on the sofa, murmuring absent-mindedly. I won't give up. I won't give up. I won't give up. His voice faintly revealed a hint of distortion. As for the other nobles and even the royal family, they silently monitored the situation without making any specific arrangements. Particularly, the royal family seemed to completely ignore Yuri's impending departure. When someone brought it up, they would change the topic. No one knew that just last night, Yuri had visited the royal palace, met with the king, and talked for the entire night. As a result, today, all the princes and princesses were scolded by the king and confined within the palace. Riesel was unaware of this, unaware that trouble was on his way, and unaware that he would soon be at the center of attention for the first time in this world.
Thanks for listening.